All right, let's do this. I'm so unprepared. So we have to tag the Crypto Town Hall, the Wall Street Journal article, and kick this off.
Mario, I think everyone's unprepared right now. There is just so much fucking news going on every second. I don't know how we're supposed to keep up.
Yeah, man, I don't like this.
It's happening right now as we speak.
What's happening now, Lloyd?
Well, I just mean all the things. The news is coming out as we speak.
Yeah, I saw the Wall Street Journal article that came in about an hour ago, just over an hour. I haven't seen anything on that. So this is just. I've asked Ryan. I've just messaged CZ if you want to message him as well if he wants to come on. Which I doubt he will, considering the circumstances.
I doubt he will. I actually think. I mean, I'm hearing that he's in Seattle. I don't know if it's true, but I am hearing that he's already in the US in Seattle. It might not be true though.
He's supposed to appear in court today in Seattle. So yes, he probably is in the US.
Yeah, so, I would imagine he's on the ground.
Yeah. So what the news that I have is that I was going to text him, and just to be honest, I didn't do it because I just thought it's probably not the right time. But he's in. The news that I have is he's in Seattle. He's going to make some kind of court appearance, and obviously in about an hour, and in about an hour, we're gonna hear live from the DOJ exactly what the settlement is. I wonder if it actually involves some kind of prison time.
Would they? How does that announcement work? If anyone could give us an idea, like what would they announce in such a press conference? Like, would they announce that? Would they announce like any criminal charges against CZ? Is that what you mean? If there is any,
I think it's similar.
How much information do we expect to get?
I think it's similar to when SBF was charged and the New York Attorney General came on, and he said, no, today we're taking action against the following people. I think it's going to be like a spectacle like that. I'd imagine that that's what we're looking at. I don't know if any of the Americans want to maybe chime in here.
How these
these
press conferences work?
I would say my guess is, given who's up there, it's going to mainly be they'd be announcing what the charges are that are actually being filed. They'll probably be taking a little bit of a victory lap of like, look at what we did, and how good it was. I doubt. I mean, again, I'd say, Carlos, you might have a better read on this than I do. I doubt they'd be announcing the details of the deal with SBF, maybe. But I think, sorry, not SBF, CZ. I think mainly it'll be announcing what they're charging him with, and patting themselves on the back for the amazing, wonderful cooperation between them and everyone else, and how well they work together and how much they're protecting.
How detailed? How detailed will it be, though? Like, will they go through every single charge? How was SBF?
Mario, we do have the indictment. I don't know if you've seen it, but the indictment's a 32-page. There's a 32-page indictment document, which literally spells out pretty much everything that's happened. Or pretty much.
When did this come out?
I don't know. My research team sent it to me probably an hour ago. So I guess probably around an hour ago. I'm trying to just get to some of the pages here just to give you an idea. So the allegations contained in paragraph 1 to 79 are repeated and re-alleged here. Fourth, defendant and co-conspirators, known and unknown, willfully and knowingly did combine, conspire, confederate, and agree together and with each other, and with others, blah 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 blah. Wow, it's a long thing.
Bloomberg's reporting that CZ is going to be paying a $50 million fine personally on top of the $4.3 billion that Binance is going to pay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the only question now becomes, whether he's going to get jail time, whether he's going to get parole, whether it's going to be, I don't know what the mechanics are. And I guess this is where our lawyer friends can maybe step in here.
Yeah, Carlo, go on.
Yeah, what a crazy day. Interesting development. I think, given all of the options available, the DOJ electing to reach this settlement and CZ agreeing to fall on the sword, essentially to plead guilty to protect Binance's global operations, is probably a net good thing for crypto. And I think if I had to speculate, I'd say the news conference is probably going to confirm that the charges have been filed and announce that a plea is scheduled. If I had to guess, he'd be making his initial appearance today. I don't know that he'd be at the point of being ready to actually enter a plea agreement. I haven't seen anything confirming what is scheduled today in court, so I'm curious to know more about that.
So what happens to Carlo? What happens if he pleads guilty? And sorry for the like basic questions, but if he pleads guilty, what does that really mean? And how can he plead guilty? So that deal was done earlier. When would have that? When did that happen, or did he plead guilty already? Does that mean he will face jail time? Will we find out today? I'm just a bit confused about how far this has already progressed behind the scenes.
No, that's an excellent question. So federal sentencing is a bit complex. It's not as if you see in state court where people plead guilty and are simultaneously sentenced the same day. In federal court, once a guilty plea is accepted by a federal judge, then a very lengthy process begins as far as the probation interview, and they prepare a pre-sentence investigation report where they take into consideration all of the factors about him and his life, criminal history, and the nature of the offense and the calculations as far as the conduct. And then they generate a report. The report gets circulated to both the defense and the government, and they both have a chance to comment and object and ask for changes or corrections to the report. And then once all that is settled, it goes before the judge for a formal sentencing hearing. So step one would be a guilty plea. Typically, Mario, in this situation, when you have a long-term negotiation going on with the government usually forgoes a grand jury indictment where they actually have a grand jury return the indictment, and they agree to the prosecutor filing a charge where the defendant waives grand jury and agrees to a prosecutor signing off on a specific set of charges, which are called an information. And then a defendant would appear in court, be arraigned on the information, and plead guilty to that information. So it's unusual, and I'd love to see a copy of that indictment, Rand. It's unusual that they would indict, but this indictment may have been sitting sealed for a long time and already been through the grand jury process, and his defense team may have decided, okay, we need to reach an agreement here.
So that means, so if he, and sorry if I missed anything, cut out for me for a bit, but if he's already pled guilty, how does the sentencing work?
So he'd plead guilty. Let's say in theory he appears today and pleads guilty to a charge. He'd have a written plea agreement. He would sign that agreement. He would agree to then enter that plea of guilty and give up his rights to go to trial, his rights to essentially challenge the evidence. And then probation would have to start writing up a pre-sentence report, which both sides would have an opportunity to look at and make changes, corrections, or objections to. And then once that's done, it would go to a formal sentencing hearing. So there's no way he would be sentenced
Ryan,
and plead guilty simultaneously.
Yeah. Ryan, hot mic. Okay, so what would you say is the likelihood, Carlo, and anyone could jump in at afterwards, or just put your hand up or just jump in, but what's the likelihood in your opinion that he'll face jail time from the information we know? This is obviously speculative.
You know, it will of course depend on what he's agreeing to plead guilty to and the range of punishment that he'd be facing for that offense. Another option that exists is he can forego those guideline calculations that we're talking about, and he can agree to a set term of punishment. He could agree to a plea to probation if the government's on board with it, in lieu of the sizable money payment he's about to make in exchange for this agreement. So there's a lot of latitude here to negotiate. It's rare that you can get through a federal criminal conviction without some form of prison or at a minimum home confinement.
Even if you take into consideration, home confinement is the keep forgetting his name. The guy we were talking about earlier, Ryan. You were there, Carlo. The guy that stayed at home in his $2 million house in Miami.
I mean, there's a lot of options here.
Hayes. So that's one example, Carlo. But he didn't face any jail time. But there was home confinement. But if you take into consideration, because Arthur Hayes didn't have the opportunity to have that $4 billion fine or any similar fine, did he? Which is very uncommon for that to happen. And in this case, Binance may need to pay $4 billion by the looks of it, which could mean that the sentencing could be lighter. Is that fair to say, Carlo?
Well, that's the advantage of having good lawyers involved in the case early in the case, because you have this opportunity to negotiate all of this before an indictment is returned and there's a warrant for your arrest. And now you're dealing with Interpol and extradition and so forth. So he made the calculated decision. Look, he could have cooled his heels in Dubai and waited this out and waited to see what the government's move would be. But I think he made the calculated decision that it's in my best interest to reach this settlement right now to avoid the government having to go through a long and costly criminal prosecution, and I think save the company in the end, because we all can see that the domestic side of it in the United States, Binance has pretty much given up its interest in doing business in the US, but its global operation, that could have tremendous consequences globally if it were to be the subject of a criminal prosecution and be shut down, essentially.
Fair. I want to go to another speaker, and I'm going through the Wall Street Journal article. Travis, you're obviously probably the person I want to go to next in this case. And I know Mike is here as well. You've been critical of Binance for a long time. We've got more information here. Initial thoughts after reading that Wall Street Journal article and the indictment?
Yeah, I think you want to see what the monitorship is going to look like. I think that's going to be really important about what gets installed.
Can you elaborate?
Just what type of monitoring abilities the DOJ is going to be able to have in Binance, in the coming years, basically. That should be part of any settlement. And if they now have, completely open kimono for all of Binance's historical books, records, customer data, all that kind of stuff, that's going to make a massive difference in just how this situation is going to go, basically. Yeah.
And would you expect CZ to face any jail time?
I have no idea. I really have no clue.
Mike?
I don't think so. I don't think he'll face any jail. I mean, the size of the fine, 4.3 billion from the company, 50 million from him. He's got some of the best attorneys in the country, people that used to work at the DOJ, et cetera. I mean, this settlement has been underway and discussed since like January or February. That's when I first started hearing about it and tweeting about it. So, it is interesting that it finally is sort of coming to a conclusion here, at least on the DOJ and CFTC side. Please keep in mind that the SEC component of this is not resolved. I think the SEC is going to hold back from participating, in part because they want one more thing they can use to hammer down on US-based exchanges if necessary, especially in front of the pending approval of the spot ETFs. So I think they'll watch and see how this goes, and then the SEC will decide whether they want to continue with their own case. But again, this is something that those of us who've watched Binance closely for a long time have always seen coming. It was sort of inevitable that it would come to this. CZ would have to step down. They'd have to pay the fine. And the only question is just like, is Binance really still competitive globally after this? I have no idea. I think the good thing for customers is that, customers aren't going to lose all their money, and that's the thing that most of us have cared about this whole time.
I think this is best case scenario. I think CZ becomes a sacrificial lamb. He pays the fine, and I think it's a significant amount of money. But given the amount of money that Binance managed to make, I don't think it's crippling money. Certainly, it is weakening money. And I think
how much? Do you know how much money they have, approximately?
I mean, no one knows how much money they have, but you can just do some maths.
What would you guess?
They did 12 billion in revenue in 2022. 2021, they probably did something similar. So I mean, and also they made a lot of venture investments and stuff like that. So I mean, I don't think this money would cripple them. Let's put it that way.
Hey, Mario, one other thing that people should note is that CZ gets to keep his equity stake. So, he's maybe the sacrificial lamb, as Rand just said, but the reality is it's a smart play if Binance survives, because CZ gets to keep most of his money minus the 50 million, plus he gets to keep his equity stake. And he'll still, obviously, as a shadow kind of board member, still have influence on the company going forward, even if he's not actively involved day to day. So I think it's a win for CZ, and like I said, I don't think he'll spend any time in jail because of the size of the fine and how good his attorneys are.
For me, it sounds like I just don't see any negativity in this news at all. Adam, what do you think? We'll go to Jeff and Simon, Joa. What do you think, Alex? Adam, sorry.
I think it is a victory for CZ if he gets out without jail time. It is, of course, expensive. Just reading the indictment, and I put it up in the chat for the Hangout here. If you want to pick up your own copy of the indictment, I posted a link to it. what I thought was interesting is as the indictment describes the scheme, very early in that description, the indictment has the following language: defendant's decision to prioritize growth over compliance in the U.S. legal requirements meant that it facilitated billions of dollars of cryptocurrency transactions on behalf of customers, including users in comprehensively sanctioned jurisdictions such as Iran. So it's hard to look at this indictment outside of the current geopolitical context. And there is an interesting question, which might never be answered if this doesn't go to the trial, et cetera, is to what extent Binance was essentially laundering Iranian crypto.
Do you think that they were laundering Iranian crypto and sanctioned country cryptos on purpose, or do you think that it was just a case of they're running a business? It was growing very fast.
I can answer that for you, Rand, like very clearly. There are chats, there are saved chats from a number of these things from the SEC and CFTC that clearly show internal employees recognizing the gravity of the situation, but agreeing internally not to do anything about it because they want to make money, right? So, like, not to be cynical, but there's plenty of evidence that it's not an accident.
Yeah, look, that's back in the messages in the SEC indictment.
Yeah, our firm advises a lot of crypto platforms, and for many years, and it's hard to avoid the elephant in the room of sanctioned clients, appearing on your client list. Or if you run a quick search of sort of, what is the geographic footprint of my volume, and if you see a heavy presence of sanctioned countries, there's someone in the room is going to say, hold on a second. I mean, if they're doing their job, someone in the room is going to be fired. But if they're kind of loosey-goosey, as it appears Binance was, there should still be someone in the room who says, hold on a second, this doesn't look right.
Simon, Alex?
Yeah, so it's 100% that. Oh, sorry, Alex. I'll go first if you want. So it's 100% that, often you have a founder that comes from the Bitcoin ideology, and at a certain point in building a company, you take your Bitcoin ideology of why you got into this in the first place, and then suddenly you run a centralized regulated platform, and you soon realize that you actually just work for your compliance officer, and obviously, there's the different founders will have a different realization of when that comes to be, and there's a bit of a resistance, and you can see that in CZ's early messages. But it's as it says, at some point you have to have all the governance and the regulations and the compliance and everything that comes in the room, where even if you come from that ideology, you have the compliance function and it's respected, and when your compliance brings up something, no matter how much you want to throw your toys out of the pram, you still need to kind of respect it as you grow as a company. Now, obviously, Binance becomes a multi-billion-dollar company. Everything, I think, with this settlement that we're seeing is about saving the international operation. So, it's like Arthur Hayes came from that ideology of where he wouldn't do KYC, and he thought he could get away with it. And so then at some point you have to say, right, how are we going to continue our banking relationships? You've got to be regulated in Europe, you've got to be regulated in UK, you've got to be regulated everywhere. There's a virtual asset service provider now. And so at some stage you just think, what are we going to tell the banks to allow us to continue this? And what are we going to tell to regulators? Well, we've got to say that the early ideology has been thrown out. It's all adults in the room now. We're a big company, and if CZ can get away with not serving some time, then he'll be a multi-billionaire out of this. He pays his fine, and he can just enjoy and watch Bitcoin grow, because at some point these financial institutions, they're no longer fun to work for once you reach a certain size. It's all compliance, it's all problems, and you become a bank in the end, no matter how much. And so I think a lot of the founders should take that opportunity and just realize, right, it's time to actually get back to what Bitcoin is self-custody. And I think it's a natural journey for people like CZ. But
look
we'll
at
see what
Arthur
happens.
Hayes. look at Arthur Hayes, Simon, as an example to back what you just said. It looked like he was going to be prosecuted and spend time in jail. And instead, now he's just skiing and eating sushi and writing these amazing blog posts, right? Because you can make a ton of money running an exchange, but at some point you have enough money and the risk to be your freedom, basically, of running an exchange that doesn't follow the law is not worth it, right? Because you're already wealthy. You might as well just enjoy holding Bitcoin, Ethereum for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex. I've got a question.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I mean, to both, I think Simon's kind of right on in how this goes, right? Like you start off in the super early days with an ideology that's just kind of like, why the fuck would I care about like US, AML, KYC stuff? And you just start down that path. Like, do I think that CZ set out to be like, let's create a place where Iran and North Korea can launder all of their money through? No, they just like didn't care. But yeah, I think at some point you get tired, and you've seen this game, you've seen this pattern get run too. I mean, it's a little bit of a similar path that even happened like with Travis at Uber and things, right? Like just blow through all the initial regulations, get big, and then at some point you just kind of like give up the control, step back. And I think, depending on what the actual criminal and potential sentencing for CZ is, if he spends 6 months or a year under house arrest, pays 50 million bucks, and then walks away with a $10 billion stake, a totally clear, basically at that point, no more jurisdictions chasing after him because it's all cleared up, and he just, sits back, keeps his Binance stake, tells the company what to do through whoever's running it. Like, it's a pretty good outcome for a guy like that.
Jeff, Carlo?
Yeah, I just want to weigh in on the prison thing. I think it's remarkable he's coming to Seattle because note he's avoided stepping foot in the States for years because he feared arrest.
Are you sure? Are you sure? Because people have told me he's been in the States. Brand could have answered this one as well. Are you sure he hasn't been to the States over the last couple of years?
I don't believe so. I know he came. I did an interview with him recently, and I know he came to Canada for his father's funeral about a year or so ago. But as far as I know, I don't think maybe he's come discreetly. It could be wrong, but I think the fact he's turning up in Seattle. I mean, if he was going to be going to prison,
and is that
he
is
could have
that
avoided
confirmed?
that by staying in Dubai or whatever. I just want to add too. He's got 2 young children with the mother of his kids. Who's like the number 2 at Binance. So it's possible he's, I think whoever said, Carlo put it well, he decided to save the company. And that's what he did. But falling on his sword, as far as I know, I don't think he's going to go to prison, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah. David, I haven't heard your thoughts yet. Have you gone through the indictment, David?
I have not. I'm sitting on a boat in the middle of gorgeous South Florida, just thinking to myself, I should have gone into this business. I would have been a great fraudster at a crypto exchange. You get all this money, you do all this work, and at the end of the day, he built such a big moat. They're going to basically, I say, no jail time, maybe a house arrest, and he's the winner. He's the hard winner.
You're cutting out.
No, I muted myself. A boat just passed me. I muted myself.
Oh, you're just pretty good. You don't need to.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just so. This is the wrong thing that happened. This isn't. The fine is meaningless. $1 billion to Binance and him is nothing. At the end of the day, if I'm sorry, 4 billion is nothing. At the end of the day, if he doesn't serve real jail time, then what was this all about? I just hope Look, at the end of the day, I'm just a guy who represents victims. I think a lot of people got hurt early on in crypto because money was laundered at Binance, and I hope some of that money goes back to helping them.
Yeah, so I'm just going through here. The Daily Mail put out a story to see if there's any good summary of it. But yeah, Zhao CZ agreed to plead guilty in Seattle on Tuesday, which is today, and will step down as CEO. He will also plead guilty to a criminal charge and agree to the large fine. The deal with prosecutors brings an end to years-long investigation. So this is 100% confirmed that he's pleading, has agreed. That's not leak or anything, correct? That's been confirmed? Anyone?
Well, I would say this, Mario, in quickly skimming the charging document, we can confirm one thing. He was not indicted by a grand jury. It's titled an information. So as I had said earlier, an information is a prosecutor's charging document. It didn't go through a full grand jury vote. So that suggests to me that there is real assurance here that this was a well thought out, negotiated deal. And if he's appearing in court today on an information, then he is probably pleading guilty to that information, because probably all the details have been worked out. And of course, it's interesting timing that they're doing this on the eve of a holiday. It's amazing how these stories always seem to break right on the eve of Thanksgiving. So we all have something to talk about at the dinner table with our crypto family members.
Yeah, it's the press conference is in 45 minutes, correct? Goody, I think you're gonna stream it. Yeah, you've got the link, Goody.
Yeah, I've got it set up, and we're gonna stream it live here.
How long do these usually take, guys? Anyone jump in on this one? Are they usually short if you look at past similar press conferences?
I think it'll be short. They probably won't take any questions. They're just going to do their prepared statement and talk about how this is a great day for justice and how this is a good day for the consumer. They've protected the American consumer from this overseas company that was skirting Bank Secrecy Act and anti-money laundering laws. And I think they'll wrap it up pretty quick if I had to guess.
The only thing that takes a while is that all the different agencies have to speak. Like Bits Lotto is a completely irrelevant exchange, but they spent like 20 minutes because they had to have 3 or 4 different speakers come up and beat their chest and say how great they are that they removed Bits Lotto from the field. Binance is a little bit bigger. You have to have DOJ and CFTC speakers and probably a few other people just to pat some other folks on the back. But it's, dog and pony show, not really that relevant. What actually matters is that CZ actually shows up in court this afternoon and actually pleads guilty. If that actually happens, then that's the real story here.
I think it's not too early to start thinking about the EFT applications and how this is going to impact them. I think the regulators who have been negative on the EFTs have been probably citing Binance as this unregulated, unknown, mysterious, largest exchange in the world, and citing that as a reason to deny the applications. And I'm thinking out loud with everyone else here as to whether that logic is now different because of this this plea deal, and whether there's a kind of whitewashing to a degree of Binance from the point of view of other regulators.
Well, I did tweet about this just an hour ago, specifically, and notably, the SEC is not included in this plea deal, so they're withholding the ability to act differently, which I think is important. But I also think there's a component of this that's, if you can remove a player, you can defang essentially a large player that is known to have committed fraud and money laundering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, operated in an unlicensed way. You're removing one other risk factor for why you might be able to approve an ETF, because the argument this whole time has been this is a manipulated market. The spot market's manipulated. The international unregulated exchanges are leading the market, and so even if Coinbase is somewhat non-nefarious, you've got these other larger venues that are driving price. And I think sort of removing Binance from the field in a sense through this action, making them less relevant. They've already done it in the U.S. Now they're kind of doing it internationally. They're not killing Binance completely, but it's going to be a less relevant exchange. I think the SEC can at some point say, okay, we're confident that a lot of the money laundering and fraud has been removed, and so now we can approve the ETF on time, in early January, which is sort of the current timeline.
Yeah, and so I was saying EFT, I meant to say ETF. But one thing I just want to add on that is the indictment talks about the intentional maintenance of U.S. customers and kind of shrouding the identity of U.S. customers to continue serving them despite Binance not having the necessary compliance policies. And that really is an anti-competitive behavior. And those U.S. whales that traded on Binance, had Binance complied with the law, well, it wouldn't be serving them. And it gave Binance this unfair advantage. And so those U.S. platforms that bother to comply with the rules would have maybe been able to hold on to those whale traders had Binance actually complied with the rules.
Yeah, so it also says that Samuel Lim will also be charged as part of the settlement. Does anyone have more information on what Lim is into and what he could face? He's the chief compliance officer. And is it common for the chief compliance officer, Carlo, to also be held liable in situations like this?
Well,
it is absolutely.
Yeah,
Sorry.
for sure. If there's evidence of culpability here and knowledge of what was going on as far as the practices with respect to the VPNs and to skirting U.S. Regulations under Bank Secrecy Act and under FinCEN, then of course he's definitely got exposure.
So, Mike, would you say this is obviously you're not going to say it's worse than expected? Would you say it's a lot better than what you were expecting over the last couple of years?
No, I said earlier, my initial commentary, this is exactly the way I thought it would go. I even tweeted 2 or 3 times back in the spring that it was likely to lead to a settlement. I thought it would be between 1 and 3 billion was what I tweeted 9 or 10 months ago now. It came out a little bit bigger than that, which is partially why I'm so confident that CZ is not going to go to prison. And so, yeah, it's exactly what I expected. And I think it has more of an impact from a signaling standpoint globally that, hey, if CZ was forced to step down, then clearly whatever he did, even though most people won't understand the details of this case, they'll realize that maybe there's more risk in the platform than they originally thought, which was my whole point the whole time over the last 12 months, was simply that the marketing around Binance was false. It was being run in a very similar way to other exchanges that had previously been blown up or failed. But in this case, it was so large, and hopefully they still have most of the customer funds. Again, the bottom line here is, as long as Binance doesn't collapse catastrophically, we're in a new bull market now. So now we're just cleaning up the remaining remnants of the bad behavior before.
Shit. Well, hearing it from you, Mike, is very different to hearing it from others like Ryan. That's pretty exciting. Jacqueline, is there anything that we haven't covered that we should be covering? Do you think it's fair to be bullish after seeing this news?
I mean, it feels like we're weaving in and out of a potential bull market. But on Mike's point, I think, Binance was kind of operating in the US, and in the filing, they said in a deliberate and calculated effort to profit from the US market, but without following US laws. So it was like they were doing everything in the US, but without following the rules that, say, maybe Coinbase or even Kraken, who faced other charges earlier this week, had to do too. And also in late March, the CFTC also filed a suit against Binance, CZ, and the chief compliance officer, Sam Lim, for allegedly breaking trading and derivative rules. So it's not the first time Samuel Lim has been in these filings.
Irina, before we go to Travis. Hey. All right, I can't hear you, Irina. Just gonna go to Travis. You can fix your mic. Be good, Travis. And same question that I asked Mike. Would be love to get your thoughts, and then maybe slowly moving on the impact on the market. We've got like 37 minutes before we live stream the conference, and I want to actually the last 20 minutes before the conference, I want to talk about what we could expect to hear. Is there anything that could change things that they could mention in the press conference, or is it going to be pretty standard? Tapping each other on the back. But Travis, my question to you is what that means for the markets and how does that compare to your expectations?
Yeah, Mike touched on it just for a second, but in terms of the kind of, you hope that they have all of the money. That's why I think it's going to be very interesting to see what type of monitorship capabilities are immediately put in place or may already be put in place. If the U.S. Department of Justice is now running Binance.com's KYC department, then there may not be the ability, there may already not be the ability for some types of, non-KYC, gray, black market money, whether you're on some list, all this kind of stuff. You may already not have the ability to remove assets from Binance. And so that's going to be one of the most critical things.
Sorry, say that. Can you expand that point again? Can you expand on that point? So what do you mean you won't have the ability to remove your assets from Binance?
I've talked about it here before, where it's like, if there's it goes back to like, do you think Binance.com has all of customers' money? But if there's say a $5 billion hole in their balance sheet, but there's $10 billion worth of gray and black market money that is unable to move off of Binance.com, then there is no hole. The hole never gets found out. And the manner in which withdrawals are going to be processed, immediately today and in the coming weeks and months is still, as far as I know, we don't know how that's going to look right now. I don't think they've said anything about that. If somebody's seen that somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, but that'll just have a very significant impact on what happens with.
But how long do they usually have to pay such a large sum? It will be over many years, or it has to be within a short period of time?
I think I saw something about within 18 months. I think I saw that.
That's pretty tough.
But don't quote me on that.
Just to be clear, guys, they're not going to accept Tether, right? So like they're going to have to pay it in dollars, and they did put dollars into Twitter. They invested with Elon Musk $500 million into X, and so they have several times in the past had billions of dollars of cash. But I think given that it wasn't originally a fiat denominated exchange and it really mostly accepted crypto deposits from the beginning, like you have to be somewhat skeptical that they could actually come up with $4 billion of cash without crashing BNB or any of these other sources of collateral that they might have.
But that would have been priced in. I think the market is pricing in that they have enough cash. BNB is sitting at -3% for the day, so it's about the same as it was.
Mario,
was a bit higher earlier.
I got to be honest. That's there's just no way anyone could know right now what the true solvency situation.
But I'm sure. But I think there's insiders would have an ID. Correct me if I'm wrong, but generally insiders would have an ID and that have enough big enough pockets that they'd lead the way.
Insiders at FTX knew there was a problem, and FTT token still traded at $20, $30, $40, $50 until it suddenly traded at 30 cents. So again, I'm not saying at all, Mario, that that's what's happening at Binance. But if you give the market too much credit in this type of market, like you're deluding yourself. Nobody knows, except for maybe CZ, whether they actually have the liquidity to pay $4 billion. And keep in mind, by resigning, CZ is no longer responsible for that, which is a very convenient thing to do right before you have to pay a large fine that you may not.
But he has equity. So I don't know if he'd agree to that deal if he didn't have
equity in the exchange, which is illiquid. There's no active market for Binance shares right now. So
but he does have a lot of BNB tokens on a personal level as well. So I'm saying he has an incentive to make sure he doesn't accept a deal that would bankrupt the company.
There's also the FTX Chapter 11. That's another $2 billion.
But I mean, this is one of the interesting things.
The FTX estate still hasn't gone on after that. We don't know what they're doing with that.
But so here's my question: is you've got if they're giving him a deal that resolves all of these open charges, and Janet Yellen and Merrick Garland are about to get up in front of a bunch of people and say, we've protected the consumer, things are good. Like, presumably, they have gotten at least some look under the hood and are confident that this is going to keep the exchange from collapsing and a bunch of consumers for losing money, or they're not going to get up in front of a crowd just to look like total idiots 2 weeks from now. So I have to assume, right, the government has gotten some look under the hood at Binance and understands what that financial structure looks like.
To be clear, though, the government's not responsible for what ultimately happens to Binance. That's not what this case is about. This case is about
I'm just talking about the political reality. No, I'm just talking about the political realities of Janet Yellen.
I'm saying it's completely irrelevant. They care about what's happening today is they care about stopping the money laundering and stopping the leadership of a specific entity that did a specific thing. They don't care if 2 years from now some offshore unregulated casino blows up, or 6 months or 9 months from now. That's not really their responsibility, to be fair.
I mean, I think that is legally true and technically by their job description true, but this is why I'm talking about the political realities. Do they care if it happens in 2 years? No, but they definitely care if it happens in the next few weeks or something, and it looks like it because it was proximate to their actions after they told everyone that this was going to protect the consumer, because that has been part of the line, even if this is more sanctions and AML KYC focused.
Carlo, go ahead.
So from a practical standpoint, there's a few ways that this money can be settled. Oftentimes, in my experience, the government will do an asset preservation agreement where they will require a target to put up the money, usually hold it in an attorney's trust account or something to that effect, or deposit it in the court's registry. So that is one option, but this is a sizable amount of money. So this is probably going to be something that's going to be escrowed in a different way. There is also the possibility that after sentencing, if he's put on supervised release, it'll be handed over to the U.S. Attorney's Asset Forfeiture Restitution Unit, and they will then structure a payment plan with him.
Carlos, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't know if people had spoken about this. We have the government's memorandum regarding the plea proceedings, right, where they outline the entire process. It's a document that's posted on Pacer right now. I will post it to my Twitter, but
excellent.
And So let me just, if you don't mind, Mario, I can read some portions of it.
Please, yeah, please do.
Okay, so Binance agrees to the appropriate sentence as a fine of $1.8 billion, which reflects a 20% discount off the bottom of the applicable sentencing guidelines. Fine range for Binance's cooperation and participation. Binance agrees to pay the criminal fine no later than 15 months after Binance's sentencing, subject to...
Sorry. So how much and over what period of time? 15 months?
15 months after Binance's sentencing, subject to crediting with regulatory agencies with which Binance has reached parallel resolutions as described in the Binance plea agreement. Binance consents to an entry of an order of forfeiture requiring Binance to pay a money judgment representing property forfeitable to the United States government in the amount of $2.5 billion. The total money consists of $1.6 billion in fees that Binance admits it collected for transactions involving U.S. users and includes, but is not limited to, a sum of money reflecting the proceeds Binance obtained from it as an unlicensed MTB offense. An amount which Binance agrees to pay no later than 6 months after the sentencing. $898 million that Binance admits is the amount of transactions it caused between users who were persons in the United States and persons who resided in Iran in violation. Okay, so that's pretty significant there. Binance agrees that it shall not, either directly or through its present attorneys, agents, or any other person authorized to speak for Binance, make any public statement in litigation or otherwise contradicting the acceptance of full responsibility by Binance for the facts described in the information and statement of facts. And then it includes a lengthy statement of facts. It's about 25 pages. Moving forward, I didn't mention that earlier part of the plea agreement. There's a condition here that Binance agrees to the stipulation of the fact, we already talked about that, but that they will cooperate fully with the government in any all matters relating to the conduct described in the plea agreement, and that they, in addition to accepting the resignation of CZ, will maintain and enhance its compliance program outlined in Exhibit C. And that's a 10-page document itself. We'll get to that. In addition, Binance will appoint an independent compliance monitor for a period of 3 years to ensure Binance's compliance with the terms of the plea agreement and report to the government as described in Attachment D. So we got to go to Attachment D. I'm going to keep scanning through this. This is extremely lengthy.
Yeah. So Joe, can you just give us a quick recap of what you've read so far before going to Arena?
Sure.
I wrote. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the broad strokes is this, and I'm still going through this, so take it with a grain of salt. But it outlines the amount of the fines, how they're calculating the fines, which is a discount off of the sentencing guidelines for their partial cooperation and remediation. They're going to pay most of this within the next 6 to 16 months, as outlined in here. You're going to, according to this, they do not have a full look at their books, and they're appointing interim and compliance officers as early as next week to take a look at the books. And this is assuming the plea, is obviously approved by the judge. But we have a ton of detail on this. I need to do some diligence here and go through a little bit more. So I'll be back in a moment.
Yeah, just jump in whenever you got it. Just put your hand up or jump in, Joe. Arena, based on what Joe just read, and I'm seeing. So, Joe, just before you jump off, so 15 months to pay the 1.5 billion, 6 months to pay 2.5 billion, and then the 900 million, so another billion approximately. How long do they have for that one?
Okay, so let me go back to this section here because I had moved along. So the 898 million shall be paid no later than 30 days after sentencing. So that's the first one. We're going to get the 898 million no later than 30 days after sentencing.
So they have to pay the whole thing in 6 months. Is that right?
Well, not this 1 point. What did I say? 1.8 billion.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. The 1 point. Sorry, 1 point. Is it 1.5 or 1.8? That 1 is 15. Yeah. 1.8, 150. So that's a bigger number than the initial 4 billion. So you got 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.3. I think it is billion. So it's a lot more than what was initially reported. Is that true?
It looks like, yeah. So just to do the math again. So you got 1.6, 898.
5.2. Yeah, 5.2, not 5.2.
Yeah, that's right.
Shit. And does that? What do you think?
The key question. I mean, the key issue for this, I think, from the standpoint of assessing the risk to Binance moving forward, is they're agreeing to have these compliance officers come in and basically take over and monitor the organization. Somebody said earlier, they were alluding to the fact that, they might already be in there. Judging from this, I don't believe that to be the case. And who knows what bodies they will find buried once they actually get in there, what kind of records they got. I mean, remember, you know, when the trustees took over for the FTX case, they said it was some of the worst record keeping that he had ever, you know, encountered in his professional career. So who knows, you know, what they're going to find actually buried there once they get in and get a hold of the books.
Hold on. So when they get a hold of the book, so when does that happen and for what purpose?
Well, according to this, if the plea is accepted, that should take place in the next 30 days, or rather 30 days after sentencing.
And they haven't had access. You're saying they haven't had access to the books in their investigation?
I'm going off of what the government's. This is a document that's public. Okay, it was filed yesterday, but it was unsealed this morning. This is the government's memorandum regarding the plea proceedings. So this is, you know, take it with a grain of salt if the judge approves it. But based on this, it does not appear that they had a full understanding of what the books are there.
Just briefly for a second on the personal liability of the chief compliance officer. There was a case, it goes back about 10 years, but where MoneyGram CCO ended up being liable for just over $1 million for his oversight of an AML program that ultimately failed. So that's a 10-year-old figure of around $1 million, probably quite a lot more in the Binance case.
Irina?
Yeah, my microphone seems to be playing up today.
It's good now. Perfect now.
Great. But one of the most things that we probably need to think about is the appointment of an independent compliance monitor. Back in my prior crypto days, I represented a Swiss company that operated in Dubai, and we basically entered into a settlement with SEC and DOJ for $250 million. And the thing that we fought against is the appointment of an independent compliance monitor, because basically what it means is that the US government appoints a person who sits above the board and tells you everything you can and cannot do, basically runs your company. And that's what killed the operations of the business. That's what killed the operations of the Swiss company in the Middle East, in Dubai specifically. And that is, for me, reading this 4 billion, okay, who cares, you can earn more money, but
5.2.
Yeah, 5.2 billion, who cares, you can earn more money, right? A billion here, a billion there. But independent compliance monitor, that will be for me, as I experienced that, for me that would be the end of the US.
Why? But why though? Why? Like, they just have to play by the rules that are getting clearer every 3 months.
No. Basically, that person sits above the board, and you cannot, the board cannot make decisions. The executives cannot make decisions unless that independent compliance monitor approves that decision, and that can take forever and a day. I'm sure that person will not come from crypto industry. I'm sure that person would be some sort of government clerk who doesn't understand how crypto exchanges are run. Hopefully that's not the case, but in our case that was the case. So that is, imagine you're running a startup, and I'm sure many people here have experiences with running a tech startup and running a crypto startup. That's like different beast out there, right? In crypto you have to make moves you have to make decisions on the spot, whereas you cannot make a decision unless that compliance monitor approves that decision. It might take them a week, it might take them a month, or they might say, no, we don't like it, and you lost an opportunity. So for me, that is one of the things we need to really look out for and be concerned about. I'm not concerned about CZ going to prison. I don't think he will, but that's, for me, that independent monitor for me is the end of the US operations, which is fine because there are global operations, right? Binance is huge in the Middle East, they're huge in Dubai, so there's enough of market
But the US,
there.
but US operations have already died. Like, I don't know why that's that concerning, Irina. I don't know what's left to kill.
Well, if there's nothing to kill, then maybe it was a sacrificial lamb, right? Maybe it was
but if you're not, but if you're not worried about the $5 billion, we'll go to Mike and then Travis. But if you're not worried about the $5 billion, if you're not worried about the, I can't remember him, you don't think he's going to go to prison. I just think this cannot be any better. I just think this is by far the best case scenario, and I think no one disagrees with that. Mike, you were jumping in.
Yeah, I think the context that's really important about this monitor is that we've already determined that there is no board of directors, that there was no CFO, for example. So CZ effectively makes every decision. Like, this is well proven now. So this monitor is much more significant at Binance than it would be at another company that already had governance structures that allowed decisions to be made in another way other than just CZ doing it. The other thing to keep in mind is the cash flow figures, all the revenue, the profits in the past, the entire business model is predicated on not having any sort of compliance function with any teeth on it. And so to Irina's point, I think it's really significant for that to happen here, because I don't even think the revenue and the cash flow figures could be trusted, because it would depend on the company being able to continue to run in the same way it was in the past. And I don't think that's what's going to happen. So again, I don't think it kills Binance completely, but the word I'd use is defang. Like, I just don't think Binance is going to be as competitive. I don't think they're going to grow. And so they may be able to pay this fine by like liquidating BNB and doing a number of other things with their balance sheet over time, but they're not going to grow out of this. They're always going to be smaller, sort of like BitMEX. BitMEX did the settlement, like the founders are not in prison, or at least Arthur Hayes is not. But like BitMEX was never as competitive ever again. Like, that's sort of probably what's going to happen here.
What happened to BitMEX since the... Go ahead, Travis. Go ahead.
My question was, does anybody know if BitMEX got a monitor? I would assume that they would, but I don't recall.
They did not.
They did not. Well,
Oh,
that's
wow.
interesting.
Why?
Is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why would Binance get it and CZ, let's say he doesn't go to jail, but then Hayes, house arrest? Doesn't he serve a small sentence before his house arrest, or am I incorrect? He just immediately goes to house arrest.
I don't think he ever goes to jail. I don't think, or did.
Okay. Well, he goes to house arrest, and he faces pretty serious charges. Yet BitMEX doesn't have the monitorship.
Yeah, I mean, the scale is very different, right? The scale of the allegations.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and then just the scale of the fine as well too. Were they 175? Is that what they were? 175 million? I don't know, but you're talking about, single digit percentages or something like that in terms of the size of the fine relative to Binance's fine.
BitMEX was 100 million plus 10 million each from each of the founders, so it was like 130 million total.
Yeah, a little bit of a different scale here. Yeah.
So the question I have for the panel is, we're going to live stream the press conference in 18 minutes. How important is that press conference, considering we have the indictment now? And what should we, is there certain things we should be on the lookout for? Is there certain revelations that are not in the indictment, or is it just going to be more of a victory lap for them?
I think it'll be a victory lap. I don't think you're going to get any groundbreaking announcements from this, other than everybody will compliment all the agencies that participated in reaching this resolution. Everyone's going to get some time on the mic and some camera time to talk, and they're going to confirm, I think, what we already know.
Okay. Anyone disagree with that? Cool. So this should be a victory lap for us. And then if we look at so I'm just looking at the market. So BNB is sitting pretty stable. It's down 4% for the day. So I think just doesn't give much of a sign. And you got Bitcoin is sitting, it bounced up. I know we don't have any technical analysts here, but it went up. It was hit a low of 36.2 earlier today. And we got the first piece of news. I think the leak that came in from Bloomberg, it went up to 37K. And then went all the way up to 37.5K. I think that's when the indictment came out. So that's 9:20, 2 hours ago. So that's when the indictment came out. And then it's dropped back down to 37K. So the market, it's either all been priced in, or the market is stupid, as I think Mike mentioned, or it's really nothing too major. I'm not sure if anyone wants to comment on the market. Alex, maybe you could jump in on this one. Jeff, maybe give us your
one comment real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I think what's happening is they're clearing the field for the institutionalization wave that's coming over the next 2 years, right? Like the spot ETF is going to get approved. There's a bunch of new regulated custodians. Like, the U.S. market is still a really big opportunity for Bitcoin and Ethereum and anything else that's sort of labeled a commodity. I think they will allow securities to trade, like crypto securities. They'll just have to register like a traditional company security would be registered. So I see this as just a field clearing process. The market already knew that we were setting up for a 2-year kind of bull market, right? Like, the market's behaving in a way like this has all been known. Again, I knew about the potential settlement 9-10 months ago. I wasn't the only one, because I was being told this by other people that were closer to the actual settlement process. But this is clearly just a continuation, right? Like if anything, there might be one more, like Crypto.com or Huobi or one of these other
But
exchanges.
that doesn't matter. I think that doesn't matter. I think that won't impact the market much. I think if Binance had that little impact now and we've kind of priced it in and we've digested it, the market shares dropped over the last whatever number of months. I just don't think any other than Tether. I think there's no more black swan events we should be worried about. I'm not sure if anyone disagrees. And before Tom, I'm going to bring you up. And before getting thoughts on this particular question, Jeff, maybe you could jump in on this one, whether there's anything else we should be worried about. I do want to give a quick shout out to I met the CEO yesterday of Killer Whales, the show that me ran and Scaramucci and others are judges on. It's the biggest show in crypto. It's like a Shark Tank show. They're coming out in January. They're not a sponsor of the show, but I'm just a big fan of them. So I just want to give a shout out to Killer Whales. So anyone hasn't checked him out, go to Killer Whales TV on Twitter. It's an incredible show, and I think it drops in January on TV around the world. So I want to give him a shout out. I see one of their members in the audience. But Alex, the question on, is there any other black swan events we should be worried about? This is it. Tether is the last one standing.
Dude, I'm not going to jinx everything by saying there's no more black swans out there. Come on. I will say I hard agree with Mike on this. I think, look, we hear the phrase like everything's priced in, but to a degree, this indictment and even the settlement's not really a surprise to anyone. And if anything, yeah, this kind of shows the maturity of crypto. If you look at it, whenever, public companies in the US announce a settlement with a regulator, their stock goes up because it's resolving the question mark and the ambiguity. So I think that's exactly the dynamic we're seeing at play here. It removes the question mark, and yeah, it pushes. It's definitely one step closer to Bitcoin, especially in crypto as a whole, being integrated into the TradFi system and being accepted. I think it absolutely moves the ETF plays along. And I think for those of us who work in crypto, I mean, it's unbelievable good news, unquestionably. One, like, Binance did shit wrong. They should be getting punished and hit for it. Absolutely. But without a doubt, the question of Binance collapsing was the biggest question mark of a black swan event out there. And so I think, at least, I'm not going to say removing it because it to the point, like, stuff can still happen. But I think reducing that likelihood, removing this giant question mark from there, is going to be just friggin' great for everyone.
I would have expected, by the way, not Tiger, if you want to come up, because I know you've been very critical of Binance, it'd be good to get your thoughts. But I would have expected a better response from the market, but then again, I'm always wrong. Joe, have you gone through more of the indictment? Anything else to share? We've got 12 minutes before the live press conference.
Yeah, I mean, the only pushback I would have to what Mike and Alex are saying is that I think you're totally discounting the importance of this independent compliance monitor. As is stipulated in one of these attached proposals, they have the ability to audit fully the books, and that is part of the condition of why this plea is being conducted. And although it will not absolve them of potential future prosecutions, and also it does not absolve some of the employees of potential future prosecutions. And if the assets are not there, and if the books are just a smoke and mirrors, just be careful in saying right now, based on what we know, that this is not an existential threat to the industry, because it is. I mean, ultimately, if the single greatest source of liquidity and volume for the world is put at risk here by this prosecution, which I think it still is, you still don't know until they actually get the compliance monitor in there. I think it's premature. You probably are right, but you never know.
Hey, Joe, I actually think we entirely agree. I mean, I've been talking about the systemic risk of Binance for a year, and I said that this compliance monitor will probably stop them from being able to operate their business the way that CZ is accustomed to doing so, and then
I was
create a
sorry,
problem
Mike.
with. Yeah, so we're actually in agreement, though.
I agree. I was more responding to Alex because I thought the implication was, well, this takes the one of the bigger threats out of the space. You don't know that yet. You don't know that until they.
I agree. What I was saying is I think it reduces the likelihood of an overnight collapse.
Yeah, but guys, I'm really confused, guys. But wouldn't they have access to the books? So what's the concern? There's more surprises that they don't know about that we don't know about, or the concerns that Binance can't operate the way it did, and that's not good for Binance, because the latter is not that concerning. But the latter is not that concerning, and the former is very. That's where I'm surprised. Like I'm just very surprised that in their investigation, wouldn't they get access to these things? It's a 2, 3, whatever, since 2018, a 5-year investigation.
Correct, but again, just think about how I don't know how many people have been involved in investigation with financial crimes, but there were numerous subpoenas and investigations of Arthur Andersen and Enron before it all came crashing down. right? They were investigating that before they actually blew up.
How long?
I don't have the exact dates, and I'm not going to make them up on the fly, but I will just tell you this: when you get records from a company, unless you have independent auditors going in there and verifying it and signing off on it and seeing the actual flow of funds and verifying what's in every single account and verifying every token and every asset on chain, how do you know? You can get an attestation, you can get documents purporting to reflect what is actually there, but what we know from the SEC's case against Binance is that their own lawyers were giving contradictory accounts of what assets they held. I mean, that's alleged in the SEC case. It's not that was the basis for the TRO. So, let's see what we find when they actually get in there and look at, put eyes on every single asset.
But then another question for you, Joe, before going to Tiger and Jeff. Another question: would CZ plead guilty if there were other surprises? Because he agreed to the monitorship.
Absolutely.
What do you mean?
So
okay, I'm confused.
Put it this way: if you knew that they had you dead to rights, and you knew there was a potential that they actually find worse out there, wouldn't you enter into a plea knowing that this is the most they can throw at you, and you've got protection against future prosecutions of what you did in the past?
So he's essentially, if there's other criminalities in his books, he's indemnified now from anything else they discover, or is that just based on what they've discovered so far? I was under the impression that what he's pled guilty to is what they've discovered so far, but anything new, he's not going to be indemnified from that.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what the plea agreement is. That there might be conditions. I don't actually have his attachment. I think it's attachment B in the government's memorandum, but it will outline that. It will outline sort of, basically protection against any other prior crimes, if that is the case.
There's generally a carve out, Mario, in these plea agreements that the government will not prosecute the defendant for any new non-tax related conduct related to the substance of the charge.
Correct.
Jeff, Simon, and then we'll go to Tiger to get his thoughts, and then we'll go with the press conference.
Yeah. I was just going to say.
We'll go for Jeff. Can I ask quickly, the criminal defense lawyers at the press conference today, might we find out whether CZ goes to prison and the scope of the monitoring regime?
Not on the prison question, because that's ultimately going to lie 100% in the discretion of the federal judge.
Simon, and then we'll go to Tiger.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, the world that Mike pictured is a very US-centric version of the world. You've got to remember that there's a couple of things. There's what's happening in the US, which is everything's going to be a security, but the rest of the world is going in a different direction. They're asking everyone to be a registered virtual asset service provider, and they're putting together custom regulations for the industry. That's the way the non-US world is going. So Binance is an international business. They tried to segregate their US business. They didn't succeed at that because they had one large client wallet that was moving money between the international and the US, and therefore it became an interwoven thing. One of the challenges with Binance was who regulates Binance, and when you go on the website, who you're depositing funds with. And so one of the real issues is that, just like with FTX, you got like 150 different companies there. And there was no clear disclosure around what risk are you taking when you engage in each different financial product that is registered in a different jurisdiction. And they even had the whole decentralized CFO set up where there was a CFO in each jurisdiction, but there was only really CZ on top. So solvency aside, hopefully that's all factored into the equation. But all of this was, from just having one website that doesn't have clear segregation, and each regulator not really knowing which piece they regulate. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Even in the Celsius case, we had an audit requirement, and there was 7,000 transactions that just went missing. In FTX, the database got deleted, and literally it's impossible to reconstruct some of these financial audits. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a similar thing that is not understood yet. I hope that's not the case, but we'll see.
Tiger, we've got 5 minutes before the press conference. You've been a big fan of Binance for a long time. I've asked the same question to Travis. I've asked the question to Mike. How does this compare to your expectations? Should we be happy? Should we be celebrating? Is it too early to celebrate? Got 5 minutes, man, and then
well, yeah, I think that this is a positive for the long run. It removes centralization. It removes concentration in the industry. It'll be nice to see more onshoring of liquidity, and you've been kind of seeing those hints in the CME futures. They eclipsed Binance on the BTC side. I own crypto too. I want what's best for the industry, and I think today was a very positive step forward. Binance has been doing a lot of bad shit for a long time. I don't want to say that the coast is clear, but I think this is a big leap forward, and I think it's in.
How does this ending? I know it hasn't ended yet, as with the monitorship, as Joe and Mike and others have made clear in Arena. But how does this compare to what you've expected so far? Is it better as expected?
I think that CZ will end up like Arthur Hayes. I don't think he'll go to prison. Maybe he deserves to, but I don't think he will. I think that fine is hefty enough. I think that over time, Binance kind of fades off into irrelevance and ends up like BitMEX, but just on a much larger scale. I think that I definitely think the odds of a Bitcoin ETF have improved significantly today. Obviously, I am a big critic of Tether and blah, 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 but I think that this helps pave the way for things to be better over the long run. I'm happy. I'm happy with today. And, I hope that, I don't want people to lose money. So I'm happy that, DOJ wasn't as as aggressive in a way, because I have skin in the game too. But I was cognizant of the fact that if they were to pull the rug, we could have seen a much worse reaction.
Yeah, I would exactly. I was gonna say, like, what was the other alternative? We're gonna go to Zach, get his thoughts. Goody, you ready?
Well, the other alternative was like, okay, we're gonna call AWS and seize your servers and shut down the website, right? So I think that would have been a nuclear option if the DOJ wanted to do that. But, the government has a price, and they always do. And, I think that this was a happy medium. I think that CZ stepping down, I think he should have stepped down a long time ago. I think he should have stepped down after the CFTC complaint, if I'm being honest.
Why? Why? Because he's put into an agreement now. So he's gotten something in return.
I think that the writing was on the wall after. I mean, if you read the context of that complaint, I think that the writing was on the wall after that, and the heat was ramping up thereafter. All these executives were leaving, and maybe they didn't think that he was going to go to jail, but they saw the writing on the wall with Binance. It was like, okay, it's eventually going to become. I don't want to say irrelevant. Maybe that's an extreme, but I think it'll be a much, much, much smaller player in the market. And, it's a good day.
Okay, that's good to hear. Zach, we've got Goody. You ready to play it to stream it in a couple of minutes? Goody? All right, don't disappear on me now, Goody. We got to stream it in a couple of minutes, man. 1 to 2 minutes. Great time to disappear. Let me give him a call. Zach, would love to get your thoughts on this. Been a while.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we'll start streaming.
So I think if you read the criminal information, which is the document the government sets out with the charges in cases like this, they chose money laundering. I guess I'd start with is a very serious crime in the United States. It can have very serious penalties attached to it, and you can spend a long time in prison if you're guilty of money laundering. As far as money laundering related charges go, what they chose to charge CZ with here and what he pled guilty to is pretty weak tea, right? It's a violation of the Bank Secrecy Act that comes from being a money transmitter and not having a sufficient anti-money laundering program in place. Now, that is a criminal offense, right? Famously, that's what Charlie Shrem was guilty for and went to jail for early in the days of Bitcoin. But if they had gone after CZ for substantive money laundering or conspiracy to commit money laundering or some more serious offense, he could be looking at decades in prison. And the fact that they're just going after this failure to maintain an adequate AML program while being a money transmitter is a sign that, Binance had a pretty good defense here, and this could have been a lot worse.
Thanks, Zach. I've just also confirmed, just for the audience, I've confirmed with Goody. I gave Goody a quick call to make sure he's online, and he is online. Zach, the question I have for you, and he'll start streaming it as soon as it starts. Zach, the question I have for you is the market's response. Let me try to get, where is he? Is Dave? You're still there, Dave? If you want to come up for a couple of minutes, get your thoughts on the market as well. See if Gareth can come up, and see if any other analysts I know in the audience. Just request if you got a couple of minutes. But Zach, your thoughts on the market's response? Considering you're not a trader and you're an analyst.
For sure. I mean, look, it seems like the market is not responding hugely, right? Crypto is trading more or less in line with equities right now, except for BNB, which is down a little bit more. That seems totally reasonable, right? Like, it's obviously not great news that CZ is stepping down and pleading guilty to criminal charges, but I think everyone kind of had a sense that something was afoot at Binance, that there would be some criminal charges and there was an ongoing criminal probe. And I think more or less what we're seeing is that this was priced in.
Agree. Dave?
Hey, you can hear me now, right?
We can hear you perfectly fine. What are your thoughts on, obviously everything's been said so far, with the press? We might interrupt you for the press conference.
Yeah,
Goody's
no, I
going to
mean,
be
look,
streaming it.
it's the same as we were seeing this morning. I mean, we're seeing much more volatility in the order books across, and quick $100 moves in Bitcoin, which isn't very much. It seems to be settling into this range right around 37, but it's very gappy. There's more pressure. There's actually more buying on the CME December future. Probably still ETFs and other people rolling their Novembers, so it's that the premium is a little bit expanded still, which has been pretty consistent all day long. Various other cryptos have been kind of all over, but the truth is, it looks like everybody is about to tune into the same press conference we're all about to listen to.
Agree. Starts in a couple of minutes. Could there be anything in the press conference that impacts the market as well, or not really? Because everyone said so far it's just going to be a victory lap, so it means it's going to be cool to listen to, unless there's a sudden surprise. Could there be any surprises as well? And that question is for you, Dave. You can go first, and anyone else. Is there something that is unexpected that could happen in those press conferences?
No human being. I would have no respect for anyone who says there could not be a surprise, because who knows what they'll say. The truth is that as long as Binance can go as a going concern, it's not seized up. There's nothing said particularly to concern people about the ability to use Tether to buy altcoins in their ongoing business, that they're not stopped from offering leverage or any part like that. I would imagine that the market will react with relief over the next few days that it wasn't worse. Really, that's the key. But who knows what they'll say? I mean, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't all be listening, right?
Yeah, let me just add to that. This is this criminal case, which I think is coming in certainly lighter than it could have been. But let's not forget about the SEC action, which I think is more like an existential threat to Binance, right? The SEC is basically saying Binance's whole business model is illegal because these things are all securities and it's not registered as a securities exchange, et cetera, et cetera.
But that's the same threat that applies to
yes.
Coinbase and Kraken, no?
It totally is, right? But if we're going to see some sort of response here that's surprising in the press conference, I think it would have to be sort of on the civil side. I don't think that Merrick Garland or anyone at the DOJ is going to talk about that. That's not their lane. That's Gary Gensler. But I think one thing to keep in mind here is that Binance is not out of the woods on the civil side, even if they did pretty well in this criminal action.
Yeah, there is one major difference than just the whole securities thing. It's when you are a securities issuer. So if you're issuing a buy and burn token, and we've seen that it is used to fill a hole and make a company look more solvent, that's a much, much bigger thing than just what's happening with Coinbase.
And the other question that I had is the Iran thing. I think Joe still with us? No, Joe was kind of mentioned it as a concerning point, but we haven't touched on it much. What's concerning about the Iranian claims? And I can't remember what the claims were. Accepting money from Iranian clients, having Iranian customers. Can anyone elaborate on that point? Is there more to it? Should it be more concerning out of all the charges?
I don't think at this point, right? Like, there's very serious laws about accepting money from sanctioned countries and groups, and OFAC is no joke of a law. But I think if that shoe was going to drop, that shoe would have dropped. And they are not going after serious substantive money laundering charges. So I don't know. I don't think that that's a huge concern at this point.
Okay, that's good to hear. So, and Dave, I want to go to you with another question that we asked the other panelists, and we've had you on stage many times, but for anyone that hasn't heard your answer to this previously, with Binance behind us, and there was an argument that was made, I can't remember who made it, that once FTF gets arrested, once that's over, it's like turning a new page for crypto, and we can move on from this cloud of uncertainty that we've had. Now with the DOJ investigation, I remember whenever talking to someone in the TradFi world about crypto, they always mention, guys, your biggest exchange that controls the market is facing an investigation. The rumors are here. I remember speaking to a guy, and I've talked a lot about this before, but it's been a while. I remember speaking to a guy, he's a good friend. He's gotten an offer to be chairman of Binance on more than one occasion, and he's refused it. And I would call him an idiot. That was even before the collapse of FTX. I'd call him an idiot for that, and obviously he turned out to be right. So people like him and others that mentioned that investigation, that mentioned the uncertainty around Binance, what happened with FTX, with both of these being over, could that be a new page for crypto? And then that kind of links to my second question: is why isn't the market treating it as such? Because I see it as like it's not over. You know, we're still fighting the SEC, but after a bunch of small wins, we've kind of closed the book on two big matters, two big investigations. We've still got what's going to happen with DCG. We've still got the uncertainty and the FUD around Tether. But I think that's always going to be there. But the market isn't treating it as such, Dave, unless it already done that before.
I mean, Mary, you have to realize what you're basically saying, I think, is true. And I think Mike Alfred said the same thing earlier today. The fact is, when something ceases to be a problem, yeah, you might get a relief rally. But if you think about the history of the last month or two, every time markets have rallied substantively that have been derivatives led, it's faded immediately. And who are the speculators in the crypto markets? They're derivatives traders. So I think people are learning, look, this is more of a ground swelling kind of thing. It's more like when the dead wood is out and the things that we think are the unsavory parts of crypto start to fade away, more people will enter the market. That doesn't happen it's like steering an aircraft carrier, not like steering a car, right? Anyone who's ever driven a boat knows that any boat is harder to steer. It takes longer. These sorts of flows don't happen immediately. But if you're trying to form the basis for a bull run into the next 18 months, this is a necessary precondition for that bull run for that to happen. That doesn't mean it happens like that.
That's
Similar,
spot
same
on.
thing with the Argentina news yesterday. Another economy which is not going to crack down against crypto to try to get out of itself. This is important. All of these things are important, but they're necessary, not sufficient.
I talked to a bank yesterday, a major New York-based bank that deals with this space, and they said they did a roadshow in Boston like a week ago, and they talked to 15 or 18 large asset managers, and like 14 or 15 of them still can't even touch the sector at all. Like they can't even buy Bitcoin miners right now, even though they're publicly traded in BlackRock.
Why is that?
Because they're still afraid of SBF, the sentencing. They're still afraid of the potential risk with CZ and Tether. So these are major overhangs, which are for sure going to go away this cycle in most cases. And they for sure are going to lead to a deluge of new capital from traditional investors who know that they're supposed to be in the space, but are waiting for this stuff to be cleaned up. And of course, the prices will be much higher by the time they clean up. That's always the way it works.
Yeah, the one. If you want to look at the one that I remember best is the Silk Road one. So as soon as all the volume was attributed, or a massive chunk of the volume was attributed to Silk Road, as soon as the Silk Road shutdown happened, we crashed below $100 if I remember correctly, and then within a few weeks it was up above $300. But obviously we're in a completely different time and place than then. But I think that's how people react to these things that look like they've got a massive chunk of the volume, and then a part of the industry goes away that people believe makes it grow up and more people can be involved, and then you enter into a reactionary market. I can't remember where that was in the halving cycle though. That'll be interesting to check.
Could someone check how Coinbase stock is doing? I'm not on my laptop right now, because I'm curious on what that means for other exchanges. Is that a good thing, considering there's the monitorship now for Binance and that kind of puts them at a disadvantage? Or is it a bad thing because, worse could have happened to Binance, and now Binance kind of not in the clear, but is in the same boat as Kraken,
The
Coinbase?
stock is basically flat. I mean, it's down 1%. It was down more earlier. But the point is that Coinbase is completely embedded with BlackRock and these other ETF filers, and they're being used as an apparatus of the traditional system to institutionalize the space. So what's happening today with Binance is effectively a positive for Coinbase, because the things that Binance is settling on, like the money laundering, is not something that Coinbase is actually accused of. So I think there's a separation, there's a decoupling going on between the sort of blessed US onshore quasi-regulated firms and everybody else. And of course, Coinbase stock is not far from 52-week highs. It bottomed earlier this year at like 31, and it's 105 right now. So it's probably heading to 200.
I agree that it's pretty. I think that if you guys noticed, right? So when Senator Loomis gave her speech to Congress on the 26th of October, when she was, essentially bashing Tether and Binance, that was indirectly a nod to Coinbase and Circle. I don't know if anyone understood that, but there was indirectly a nod to them. So yeah, it's bullish for Coinbase. It has been since then.
Tom, you've been quiet on this. Your thoughts on everything that's happened? You're usually the loudest voice when we have you on stage, Tom.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get out of the way of the really smart people who know a little bit more about this stuff than I do. I think for me, really excited. This is just another thing that's out of the way for the industry. And when I look at it from my TradFi perspective, so I sit in Boston, I work at State Street, I have friends at BlackRock and all the big institutional players, including a lot of people who work at RIAs. So every person who has a TradFi hat on and is looking to make an allocation are really sort of, they've been scared of the space for a while. So any wins we have is very, very positive. If you can point to this to your friends, especially in those in the TradFi seats who are going to allocate capital and say, hey, look, the SEC has settled this case. They've blessed the biggest exchanges. And now we actually have the ability to put a little sort of regulatory cap on this. I think it's very exciting. So excited to see what comes out of it. I'm actually a little worried for this press conference that we're going to get some sort of, sort of price action or some sort of announcements that, we're not expecting here, right? It's definitely in the range of possibilities, as Dave was mentioning. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that we know everything that the SEC is going to say here. So I'm still holding my breath a bit.
So it's not the SEC, but I actually think that there is a fair point that specifically, since it sounds like the Attorney General himself is going to speak, listen to what Merrick Garland says about crypto as a whole, because we might get some information about how big a priority that is for the Biden administration and how hard they're going to pursue this. And especially with the recent Kraken complaint, like you might be able to glean some high level stuff, including about what the SEC might do from what the Attorney General says.
But can you, so that's a very good point. And I've got two questions for you, Zach. First, is the argument that there's a witch hunt against crypto, that argument's pretty much, I wouldn't say dead, but it's a lot weaker now considering the way they handled Binance. I think they handled it pretty well. Correct me if you think I'm wrong. That's the first question. The second question, can you touch on what happened with Kraken as well, and how concerning that is? Because I kind of got dwarfed by the Binance news.
Yeah, so I think you can't treat the United States government as a monolith. I think the DOJ is different than the SEC. And so I think we can look at three players in the government. One is the Biden administration as a whole, the executive. I think while it's not fair to say that the administration itself is on a wish hunt, they don't love crypto. They don't see it as great politics, and they're certainly not reaching out and being friends with us, even though that's not a big issue for them. Then if you look at the DOJ, I think they've been handling this very well. I think the charges against, Sam Bankman-Fried have been smart. I think this, more limited action against Binance has been smart. I think the DOJ has been a good player here and actively does not look like the DOJ is specifically hostile to crypto or on a witch hunt. But then if we look at the SEC, I think that's a slightly different story. And I think Gary Gensler does see basically all of crypto as non-compliant, as within his jurisdiction, as willfully ignoring the securities laws as he understands them. And I think when we look at the SEC in particular, which is what the Kraken case is about and not what this Binance action is about, I understand why people in crypto feel besieged by the SEC. I think that is more reasonable. The Kraken complaint we saw is largely the same allegations that have been made against Coinbase and Binance with regard to the tokens that are listed. It's the same, 11 to 15 tokens that it seems like the SEC is using as their poster childs for unregistered securities, which includes major L1s like Cardano and Solana, includes other big tokens like Matic, but then also a bunch of weird shitcoins. And the SEC basically only has to win with regard to one of those to argue that Coinbase or Kraken or Binance are acting as an unregistered security exchange. They just need to have some securities that are trading there. So I think, look, those cases I think are going to be hard to win. I think that's really where the action is for crypto. But the Kraken case I think is sort of one and the same. There's some specific differences, but it's really the same type of action we saw against Coinbase and Binance. And frankly, now that this happened with Kraken, I think we're likely to also see an action like that against Gemini.
Did CZ not show up to the plea, guys? Because I'm waiting for this press conference. Did CZ decide to fly back to Dubai? What's going on?
Yeah, it's been delayed by 15 minutes. Goody, still nothing there as well on your end?
Yeah, there's nothing on the DOJ official website. And then on YouTube Live, PBS NewsHour has a Garland and Yellen press conference in 44 minutes from now as well at 4 p.m. EST. So there's both the DOJ one and the Garland and Yellen one.
Oh, hold on. Sorry, there's two press conferences?
I'm not sure if there's two or if they're the same. There's one on the DOJ site itself, and then there's one on YouTube as well on PBS NewsHour.
Got it. Tom, jump in, and I've got a question for Mike afterwards.
Yeah, sure. So I had a question myself for the legal minds on the call. So how did this come together so quickly? It seems like a $4 billion settlement is pretty sizable. Is that just me not understanding things?
It wasn't quick. They've been working on it since January, February.
Wow. Okay, so it's just announced now is the reason that it seems so quick. Okay, got it.
Mike, the question I have for you is the Kraken news. For a question for you and for Zach. Is that surprising? Because I thought it shouldn't be too surprising considering what the SEC is doing with Coinbase and others, and obviously Binance. But we had some of the panelists in the previous space who were a bit surprised by the announcement. Can you tell us more about what the allegations are and what that means for crypto, if anything? Because I think
the same
did mention commingling of funds, no?
Yeah, the commingling thing, and I think that keeps coming up, right? And there's kind of a spectrum, because all exchanges, if they provide credit, right, if they, as they take in customer capital and as they trade on the exchange, like there's always movement of money from different parts of the exchange to other and between customers and in and out of the exchange. The question is like, did they commingle, like actively commingle the corporate funds with the customer funds in the same way that like an FTX did, and it's really interesting that the former finance guy, the CFO from Kraken, went and became a senior finance guy at Binance. There are some smoking guns in the past related to like compliance issues at Kraken that seemingly were not resolved. I think Kraken is probably not the safest U.S. exchange. Actually, something I've advised some of the companies that I work with, including one of the companies where I sit on the board. I've told them, hey, you need to be really careful with Kraken, because I don't think they're taking the rules as seriously as Coinbase does in the US. So I was not surprised by that. I don't think it's going to be nearly as bad. They probably have all the capital, but they probably need to shore up their compliance quite a bit to get on a better standard going forward.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about the securities law, on the securities law side of things, I think it is not surprising, right? I mean, this is basically exactly what is being alleged happened at Coinbase and Binance. The SEC views most tokens as unregistered securities in the way that they're sold and offered in the United States. I think, given that we've seen this with all of these exchanges, we're likely to see this with Gemini as well. And this is an issue, that we maybe could have solved in 2021 if we'd had crypto legislation. I think, the implosion of FTX sort of torpedoed that. And so now we're going to have to get some clarity from the courts. And the story of the next year or two is going to be sort of finally resolving what, the real sort of final battle for crypto in the United States, which is the SEC's interpretation of the Howey test, under which basically everything is being offered as a security. Is that correct? Or, are the courts going to come up with some newer understanding that exempts most of what's happening in crypto right now?
I just want to second that real quick, in that the SEC's posture of regulation via enforcement is the reason why Coinbase, Kraken, and some of these other U.S. Quasi-regulated exchanges have had issues. Like, I think all of those exchanges would have been willing to register as an exchange and follow more, prescribed and specific regulation if it was even a pathway that was available to them. I think Binance and FTX and Crypto.com, some of the offshore ones, are totally different animals in that they never tried to or actively tried to avoid any regulation when possible. I think there's a huge bright line difference between those two sets of firms.
Yeah, you can normally tell how good someone is at compliance by how hated they are. So if you have a really big fan base for your exchange like Binance, it's probably because you've got a good onboarding experience. You're not shutting down too many accounts. You're being more inclusive, and everyone starts with that philosophy. Then you've got the other extreme, which is Coinbase, where you'll have a lot of hate. You'll have people asking why things are taking so long, why the unbuilding experience is so hard, why is funds being frozen, why is tax authorities getting access to my data, and then you have Kraken that kind of sits somewhere in the middle. But eventually, unfortunately, all of these financial institutions become a bank in the end because compliance means every customer hates you.
I think that's a great point. And I think one thing we're likely to see as time progresses, that the way people interact with crypto is either going to be in a hyper-regulated forum like Coinbase or whatever Coinbase looks like post all these SEC actions. And once we get some clarity, where, it's incredibly doxed and there's a, huge KYC, AML protections in there, or it's going to be like pirate dexes, right? That may or may not align with the laws or whatever, the SEC decides a broker is. There are going to be some people who set up dexes that don't follow those laws. But the middle ground, quasi-compliant, quote from CC about compliance being a journey, I think we're seeing that's on the way out. And that way of operating is not going to be able to persist because law enforcement is not going to allow it to happen.
Anything, Gary, I'll let you jump in a second. Goody, is there anything else that you're checking the stream? Yeah, just want to make sure, Goody.
Yeah, no, there's nothing yet. I'm keeping an eye on it.
Perfect, I appreciate it. Gary, jump in. Good to have you back.
Hey, man, good to be here. So I pinned up in the nest, and it's just a screenshot of the 32-page charge by the SEC. So if anybody wants to actually look at it more than just one paragraph at a time, it's the entire thread.
And maybe Gary, for anyone that wasn't there when Joe gave an overview, can you give us a quick overview on what's in the indictment, and highlight the main points in your opinion and any points of concern?
I'm really here more to learn and absorb you guys' opinion than put it up there. So I just put it, that's why I didn't make any commentary on my thread. But it's the eight pieces of the 4 pages each screenshot. So that's in the nest for anybody to review. And then the second thing was, I think that Mike had said something about Kraken and also followed up by Simon. That makes sense. My opinion about like the space is, you came into Bitcoin with banking and people running executables on their computer, basically in a decentralized narrative. And I think that that's gone its path for quite some time. Now you see the newish technologies, I guess, of DEXs and other blockchains allowing for basically anything to trade. So the role of a central exchange, I don't know what it should be. I'm trying to gather your collective opinions. What Simon was saying about eventually they all become banks. They all become banks because in order to comply with the bank accounts that can be seized by any government, they have KYC, AML rules in place. And I don't know that centralizing and saying that you can trade on a central exchange that also acts as a fiat on-ramp and off-ramp is the future. I think that separation of those powers is more likely. So, any opinion about, what the role of a central exchange is with relation to what people can do with their money, similar to maybe what Visa, you have a bank account, you have a debit card. How are you spending your money? Is it the permission of the Visa or the credit card company or the bank, as far as what you spend your money on?
I think the actual biggest
go ahead.
thing, I think the biggest separation that actually needs to happen that's caused the most devastation in this space is the separation between the exchange and the market making and trading function, right? Like if you think about FTX and Alameda, if you think about Binance and Merit Peak, Binance and Sigma Chain, in both cases, it's clear that the exchange was sort of, and BitMEX as well. BitMEX was notorious for trading against their own customers. I'm sure Travis can tell you crazy stories he's heard from big traders, but that's the problem in this space is all of the fake volume, all of the fake trades that aren't really coming from like a third party who's actually making a trade for an economic reason. Like obviously CZ is really, really good at wash trading and did a really good job of convincing people there's a ton of liquidity on the exchange that candidly never really existed for some of those tokens because it was literally just the customer's own money deposited into Merit Peak and Sigma Chain trading against them. So those two things need to be separated. Like, I'm pretty sure Coinbase doesn't run algos, right? Like with their own capital on their own exchange, for example, but like everybody else did for a long time. And that is a big source of a lot of the crazy swings, the volatility in the space, and a lot of the harm that's actually been done to consumers. And that obviously needs to stop, irrespective of what your view is on CZ.
Yeah, I think this is the most important part is actually the stables part. So all financial institutions will be hated, as I said, once you do all those compliance. And so you'll probably have the centralized exchanges dealing with the Bitcoin, ETHs, and stables. And then you'll have regulated securities exchanges that are dealing with all the investment products. But then you've got that interaction with the decentralized world. And the most important thing is if these exchanges and all assets go digitized and eventually it all becomes, regulated within these centralized financial institutions, the most important thing is getting the ability to take these assets from one centralized exchange to another centralized exchange to another, decentralized exchange, so that you can just be interoperable, and make sure that we aren't engaging in fractional reserve banking. So if everything's done with stables and then we have good regulatory structures to ensure that those assets are actually backed, then we have a shift towards full reserve banking, which I think is a massive net improvement. And the transparency of when you're going from one exchange to another, having an immutable digital footprint on those blockchains. And that's where I think it all goes in the end. And you'll just have the centralized doing the low risk stuff and then pushing it out, really, depending on
Just-
it. Yeah.
I want to go back quickly to the indictment. Joe, if you want to come up and as we prepare for the press conference in about 30 minutes, I think it's one or two of them. If anyone has more clarity, do let us know. But Joe, if you want to come up, and we do have other lawyers. We've got Zach, and we've got obviously Mike, Travis. Who else can give us an overview? Adam, can anyone give us just an overview, give an audience an overview of the indictment and what we know so far? I've sent you an invite, Joe, if you want to come up and give another overview as you did before, just for anyone that wasn't there earlier. Who would like to take that one? Zach, do you want to take that one? Or Adam?
Yeah, in very brief form, the information lays out, which is similar to an indictment. It lays out Binance was operating as a money transmitter, right, which subjects it to the Bank Secrecy Act. Under the Bank Secrecy Act, Binance needed to have an adequate anti-money laundering program in place. They say CZ and Binance willfully chose not to have an adequate money laundering program in place and laid out some evidence as to why DOJ says that, and therefore they violated the law, right? And so this is not saying specifically they were engaged in money laundering, they conspired to engage in money laundering with someone else. This is they willfully did not meet their obligations based on the type of activities they were doing and the requirements that the law sets in place for people who are engaged in those types of activities.
Hey Zach, were they saying, because this is the international, so were they saying international took on US customers and therefore it was meant to be a money transmitter? Or are they treating like the whole thing as one because there was the ability to, funds were basically held and it went across the US exchange and international?
Yeah, so there's jurisdiction in part because they had some US customers, but it really is more about the activities they were engaged in that makes them a money transmitter, right? And a money service business. And basically any crypto exchange is going to meet that definition.
But if they're taking on US customers, you don't need to be a money transmitter if you're not taking on US customers.
Yeah, although even if US customers are using VPNs to get there, the DOJ is going to have jurisdiction, right? Basically, if the federal prosecutors want to,
that's your AML program. You need to make sure you're not taking on US customers. But if you're not taking on US, then you don't have to be a money transmitter.
Yeah, it also adds that they were willfully violating US economic sanctions, which goes one step further than, I didn't have a good AML program and I didn't have state money transmitter licenses. To say that they've been willfully violating sanctions and then later on calling out billions of dollars related to Iran, I think it's going a little bit further than just sort of a technical offside call?
Yeah, so that's where US certainly crossovers to international, because I mean everyone's got their United Nations sanctions list, and then maybe you do UK and then local jurisdiction, but then everyone should be looking at OFAC as well, and then you've got all of the things along those lines. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be ignoring OFAC.
It has a whole section called Scheme, where it goes on to describe in detail how they were sort of orchestrating the service to US customers and trying to hide that at the same time, not having an adequate AML program, basically turning a blind eye to all the kinds of requirements that local US exchanges really have to comply with. There was an earlier discussion of an outside supervisor being appointed, and it's a very interesting debate as to how serious an issue that really is. I know, I think it was Irina who was saying earlier that it was a really a killer for in a situation that she was involved in. But the reality is that a U.S. AML chief compliance officer is supposed to hold themselves to an objective standard that is, I don't want to say universally accepted, but that is at least that these well-trained and well-behaving U.S. compliance officers speak the same language, understand the same issues. And if an external supervisor for AML is appointed, theoretically, it's not supposed to be very much more difficult to run your business than if you had a properly trained and engaged AML officer in-house.
That's exactly, literally, Adam, that is exactly the point I made. I think under normal circumstances, you'd be correct, and applying that monitor wouldn't necessarily kill the business. But in Binance's case, because of the way it operated historically, it's not a death sentence by any means, but because you had a single individual CZ pulling the levers of power with no traditional governance structures at all, no sort of separation of duties across different functions. You didn't have the normal things you'd expect to see with like an audit, like the basic audit controls that would be in place. And so, yeah, like in a normal case, maybe you're right, but in this case, it basically functionally stops them from running the business the way Binance has historically been run. And I think that could be quite significant as it goes towards creating enough cash flow going forward to pay all of these fines and fees, which we've already established are probably closer to 5 billion, of which a big chunk of it is due, in the first year. So that's just my concern. I just want to make sure that, they're able to run their business well enough to generate the cash.
Yeah, so Mike, how big of a concern is that? So that's something that hasn't been mentioned enough. The $5 billion. Some panelists have said that it shouldn't be too hard considering their revenue. Irina, I think, was the last person that said that. I can't remember who said that this is a pretty hefty sum. We can only speculate, but what do you think, Mike, because you studied this well?
Yeah, I don't agree that it's not a big deal. I made the point that they were not going to accept, the US government is not going to accept Tether. They're not going to accept BNB. So they may, in the current denomination, have enough US dollar equivalent value, to potentially pay the fine. But if they're selling BNB, they're going to move the market with those sales, right? Because a lot of the current market valuations are supported with liquidity that doesn't actually exist. And this compliance monitor is not going to allow Merit Peak and Sigma Chain to operate hundreds of simultaneous accounts.
So Mike, under the monitorship, do you think your concern of the wash trading with BNB, and I know you've been pretty vocal about it, do you think that resolves this? Like, if under monitorship things remain the same, that means those claims are not necessarily true. Is that a fair statement?
Once the monitor is installed, if the monitor is given enough information to understand the ownership of the accounts there and where the trading's actually coming from, and BNB does not go down, right, and it continues to go up, then I would argue that perhaps maybe there isn't a serious problem there. But again, like, Binance was originally not a fiat exchange. Binance was an exchange that primarily accepted crypto deposits, and so to come up with $4 or $5 billion of cash, it's not an insignificant sum. This idea that they made all this revenue in the past, well, that was in a bull market that they made 12 billion in revenue, and that was without any compliance whatsoever without an audit. So you don't really know for sure what's going on. I'm not saying it's terrible, but anybody who says for sure it's going to be okay, they're delusional, just like they've been delusional for the last year in saying that Binance is a safe place to trade.
What's the bigger, before going to Gary, what's the bigger concern for you? Is it the monitorship, or is it the requirement to pay that $5 billion over, I think it was like 30 days for $1 billion, 60 days for, there's like 60 days for 2 billion, and the rest over like 16 months.
My argument, quite simply, is that they're inextricably linked, because the monitor is going to put the kibosh on any business practices they used previously to generate abnormally high levels of profit.
How much powers would the monitor have?
Significant. We just established earlier that the board, there's no board here, but that effectively CZ made all the decisions. CZ was the board. Now CZ is gone, and so the monitor is effectively the CEO now. There's literally no other employee at Binance that's going to have the ability to make decisions without the monitor's oversight in some capacity. So if they're actively committing crimes or doing things that are illegal, or wash trading, or sending customer money to Sigma Chain and Merit Peak, those activities will stop, and then we'll find out what the real market clearing prices are for any Binance affiliated assets, including BNB. And that's the bottom line point. We already saw what happened to BUSD when the government cracked down on Paxos. This is the next step in that squeeze that they're putting on. And again, I think Binance ultimately becomes BitMEX over the next couple of years, because it's effectively not able to operate the way it did.
With the monitorship, and I do want to get Dennis's thoughts on this. Just one more question, if you don't mind, Simon. With the monitorship, with the board, with CCP. Oh, okay, yeah, start streaming. Go ahead, yeah. All right, John, turn on the stream. So we'll be streaming the press conference.
CFTC Chairman Russ Benham. We are here today to announce that the Justice Department has secured felony guilty pleas from the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, Binance, and from its founder and CEO, Changpeng Zhao, also known as CZ. Separate from the criminal enforcement actions the Justice Department is announcing today, Secretary Yellen and Chairman Benham will also announce civil regulatory enforcement actions, and the Treasury Department and the CFTC are taking against Binance. While criminal and civil enforcement actions are subject to different legal standards, this collective effort represents the whole of government approach that we are taking to combat corporate crime. Binance has agreed to plead guilty to willfully violating the Bank Secrecy Act, knowingly failing to register as a money transmitting business, and willfully violating the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. These laws ensure that our financial institutions are not available to designated terrorist organizations, drug traffickers, and sanctioned nation states that threaten public safety and our national security. The Justice Department is requiring Binance to pay $4.3 billion in penalties and forfeitures. This is one of the largest penalties we have ever obtained from a corporate defendant in a criminal matter. The Justice Department is also imposing a monitorship as well as reporting requirements on Binance as part of today's resolution. Moving forward, Binance must file the suspicious activity reports that were required by law. The company is required to review past transactions and report suspicious activity to federal authorities. This will advance our criminal investigations into malicious cyber activity and terrorism fundraising, including the use of cryptocurrency exchanges to support groups such as Hamas. While this historic plea is an important measure of accountability, we know that corporations only act through the individuals who run them. That is why we have also filed a felony charge against and secured a guilty plea from Changpeng Zhao for willfully violating the Bank Secrecy Act. As CEO of Binance, Zhao willfully violated federal law that requires financial institutions to guard against money laundering and terrorist financing. Zhao, who resides outside of the United States, entered his plea in person in the United States District Court for the Western District of Washington earlier today. In August 2017, Zhao founded Binance as a platform where users could trade in cryptocurrency. But from the very beginning, Zhao and other Binance executives engaged in a deliberate and calculated effort to profit from the U.S. market without implementing the controls that are required by U.S. law. Zhao and Binance attracted and built a substantial U.S. customer base. Almost 2 years after Binance's founding, Zhao told senior management that the U.S. market represented 20 to 30% of the company's potential revenue. Serving these U.S. customers meant that Binance was a U.S. financial institution. U.S. financial institutions must comply with U.S. law. Zhao and other senior management at Binance understood this. They understood that the company was required by U.S. law to register with the Treasury Department as a money services business. And they understood that they were required by U.S. law to implement an effective anti-money laundering program. They failed to do either. Instead, they concluded that complying with U.S. law would stifle their efforts to grow Binance's profits, market share, and trading volume. So, rather than comply, Binance facilitated billions of dollars of unregulated cryptocurrency transactions. It willfully enabled hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions between American users and users subject to U.S. sanctions. And its platform accommodated criminals across the world who use Binance to move their stolen funds and other criminal proceeds. Binance prioritized its profits over the safety of the American people. In part because of the crimes it committed, Binance became the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. Now, Binance is paying one of the largest corporate penalties in U.S. history. Binance employees knew and discussed that the company was serving thousands of users in sanctioned countries. And they knew that facilitating transactions between U.S. users and users in sanctioned countries would be in violation of U.S. law. But they did it anyway. Binance enabled nearly $900 million in transactions between U.S. and Iranian users. And it facilitated millions of dollars in transactions between U.S. users and users in Syria and in the Russian-occupied Ukrainian regions of Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk. Binance's own compliance personnel also knew that the company's anti-money laundering procedures were inadequate and would attract criminals to the platform. In a February 2019 chat, one compliance employee wrote that they needed a banner that said, quote, "Is washing drug money too hard these days? Come to Binance. We got cake for you." By failing to comply with U.S. law, Binance made it easy for criminals to move their stolen funds and illicit proceeds on its exchanges. For example, between August 2017 and April 2022, there were direct transfers of approximately $106 million in Bitcoin to Binance.com wallets from Hydra. Hydra was a popular Russian darknet marketplace, frequently utilized by criminals, that facilitated the sale of illegal goods and services. Binance only stopped processing Hydra transactions in April of 2022, when the Justice Department and our criminal law enforcement partners seized control of the Hydra marketplace and shut it down. From February 2018 to May 2019, Binance processed more than $275 million in deposits and $273 million in withdrawals from Best Mixer. Best Mixer was one of the largest cryptocurrency anonymizing services in the world before it was shut down for money laundering. Binance also did more than just fail to comply with federal law. It pretended to comply. In June 2019, Binance publicly announced that it would block U.S. users from Binance.com and launch a separate U.S. exchange. That exchange, Binance.us, would register with the Treasury Department and serve the U.S. market. Binance blocked some U.S. users on Binance.com and redirected them to the U.S. exchange. At the same time, however, Binance continued to allow some of its most important high-volume U.S. users to remain on the unregistered Binance.com exchange. At the direction of Zhao and other senior leaders at Binance, employees encouraged their high-volume U.S. users to conceal their U.S. connections including by creating new accounts that obscured their locations. As Zhao himself said in a September 2019 chat, quote, "If we blocked US users from day one, Binance will not be as big as we are today. We would also not have had any US revenue we had for the last 2 years." He then added, quote, "Better to ask for forgiveness than permission," close quote. Over a year after Binance publicly announced that it was blocking US users, an internal monthly company report attributed 16% of its total registered user base to the United States. That was more than any other country on the unregulated Binance.com platform. In the next monthly report, Binance removed the United States label and recategorized US users with the label UNKWN, short for unknown. In October 2020, users labeled as UNKWN represented approximately 17% of Binance's registered user base. Binance and Zhao profited significantly from their violations of federal law. That they are facing accountability for their crimes is due to the extraordinary hard work of the extraordinary public servants at the Department of Justice. I want to thank the Criminal Division's Money Laundering and Asset Recovery Section, the National Security Division's Counterintelligence and Export Control Section, and the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Washington for their excellent work. I also want to thank Secretary Yellen and her team at the Treasury Department, including IRS Criminal Investigation, as well as CFTC Chairman Benham and his team for their extraordinary partnership in this matter. In just the past month, the Justice Department has successfully prosecuted the CEOs of 2 of the world's largest cryptocurrency exchanges in 2 separate criminal cases. The message here should be clear. Using new technology to break the law does not make you a disruptor. It makes you a criminal. This Justice Department has no tolerance for crimes that threaten our economic institutions and undermine public trust in the fairness of those institutions. And we will hold accountable the individuals who commit and profit from them. I'm now pleased to turn the podium over to Secretary Yellen.
Good afternoon. I'm very glad to join Attorney General Garland, Deputy Attorney General Monaco, and CFTC Chairman Benham on such an important occasion. We're here today to announce the Treasury Department's historic action, the largest enforcement action in Treasury's history against Binance, the world's largest virtual currency exchange, for its consistent and egregious violations of U.S. anti-money laundering and sanctions law. Protecting the U.S. financial system, and through that, the global financial system, is core to the Treasury Department's mission. And ever since Binance launched its convertible virtual currency platform, it has knowingly evaded the U.S. laws designed to protect these systems. Over more than 3 years, FinCEN, OFAC, and IRS criminal investigation thoroughly investigated key aspects of Binance's activities. Our work revealed that Binance claimed to have exited the U.S. market years ago, but actually did not, retaining U.S. users and other significant ties with the United States. It also had critical gaps in its anti-money laundering program and practices, from a lack of risk-based procedures for various offerings to instructing staff to withhold information from law enforcement. It deliberately undermined its own sanctions monitoring controls, and it failed to report suspicious transactions. This meant Binance was allowing illicit actors to transact freely, supporting activities from child sexual abuse to illegal narcotics to to terrorism across more than 100,000 transactions. That includes transactions associated with terrorist groups like Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. Binance processed these transactions, but it never filed a single suspicious activity report, and it also allowed over 1.5 million virtual currency trades that violated U.S. sanctions. So we have taken the largest enforcement action in Treasury's history. FinCEN's settlement agreement assesses a penalty of $3.4 billion. OFAC's settlement agreement assesses a penalty of nearly $1 billion. Binance is also required to report the suspicious transactions it has failed to report to date and to establish an effective anti-money laundering program to support the global AML-CFT regime. And the settlement agreements subject Binance to increased scrutiny for 5 years through a third-party monitor overseen by FinCEN, who will ensure Binance's complete exit from the United States. The monitor will be able to access Binance's systems, transactions, and accounts, and will review and report on all actions included in the settlement agreements. Failure to live up to these obligations could expose Binance to substantial additional penalties. The result of these agreements will be an end to company behavior that has posed risks to the U.S. financial system, U.S. citizens, and our country's national security for too long. And let me be clear, we're also sending a message to the virtual currency industry more broadly, today and for the future. If virtual currency exchanges and financial technology firms wish to realize the tremendous benefits of being part of the U.S. financial system and serving U.S. customers, they must play by the rules. And if they do not, the U.S. government will take action. Today's announcement shows the Treasury is prepared to use all of its tools to carry out its crucial mandate of combating illicit finance and protecting the U.S. financial system, and this will make all of us safer. I want to end by thanking FinCEN, OFAC, and IRS criminal investigation employees who play a central role in protecting our national security. Adequate resourcing was critical to carrying out this work. Thank you also to the partner agencies here today for such effective collaboration. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to Deputy Attorney General Monaco.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and good afternoon. Today is a watershed moment. The Department of Justice and its partners are holding accountable the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange and the CEO who ran it for their criminal conduct. Binance vaulted to the top of the crypto market in part through the scheme exposed today by pursuing growth, market share, and profits at the expense of compliance with U.S. law. Today's charges and guilty pleas, combined with a more than $4 billion financial penalty, demonstrate the Justice Department's commitment to corporate accountability. And they sent an unmistakable message to crypto and DeFi companies: if you serve U.S. customers, you must obey U.S. law. A corporate strategy that puts profits over compliance isn't a path to riches, it's a path to federal prosecution. As detailed in the statement of facts, Changpeng Zhao was warned by his own compliance team that Binance lacked basic safeguards to prevent users from evading U.S. sanctions. He was warned of the high risk associated with some customers on their exchange. He was even warned that the CFO of another company had been arrested for sanctions violations and that the same thing could happen at Binance. But rather than implement the basic anti-money laundering safeguards that his team recommended, safeguards required by US law, Binance and its founder operated as though the rules didn't apply, as though they were beyond our reach. Crypto assets may be advertised as borderless in nature, but the Department of Justice will enforce US law across and throughout crypto markets, even in their darkest corners. Some say the key to success in the tech sector is to move fast and break things. Today's actions show that if what you break is the law, there will be consequences. Over 5 years, while building its business with US customers, Binance enabled nearly $1 billion in illegal payments involving sanctioned countries and individuals. These actions put our collective security at risk. Today, companies are increasingly operating on the front lines of the geopolitical and national security challenges that mark today's global environment. That's why the Justice Department is focused on the intersection of corporate crime and national security. Today, corporate crime undermines not only our markets and investors, but also our national security. The laws we are enforcing today were designed to protect the security of our financial markets and to protect our financial institutions from exploitation by terrorists and money launderers. Today's actions show that those rules apply equally to traditional financial institutions and those powered by decentralized and cutting-edge technologies. Today's resolutions are the result of and a credit to the combined energy and expertise of prosecutors and law enforcement agents from across the government. And in particular, I'd like to thank Nicole Argentieri, the Acting Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, who's here today, Matt Olson, the Assistant Attorney General for National Security, who's also here on stage, and Tessa Gorman, U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Washington. They each lead teams who have worked tirelessly on this case. The partnership between the Criminal Division's money laundering and asset recovery experts and the National Security Division's export control and counterintelligence experts is a response to the growing convergence of white-collar and national security investigations. So we're combining our deep expertise from across the department to combat these new and evolving threats. Together with our partners, the Justice Department will hold accountable those who occupy the C-suite and the boardroom if they exploit technologies in violation of our laws. With that, I'll turn it over to Chairman Benham.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Attorney General Garland, Treasury Secretary Yellen, Deputy Attorney General Monaco, and all of our law enforcement counterparts. Today, the CFTC stands with the Department of Justice and the Treasury Department in protecting U.S. investors and financial markets from those who sought to create an empire through a calculated strategy of regulatory avoidance and arbitrage, outright defiance of the law, and breaching the fundamental principles of market behavior. Today, the CFTC agreed to resolve charges against Binance, its founder and CEO, Changpeng Zhao, and its former Chief Compliance Officer, Samuel Lim. Binance is the world's largest digital asset exchange and offers trading in spot digital assets and digital asset derivatives, including CFTC jurisdictional products such as Bitcoin futures, options, and swaps. The proposed orders impose a civil monetary penalty and disgorgement totaling $2.7 billion against Binance, $150 million civil monetary penalty against Zhao, and a $1.5 million penalty against Lim. Binance's activities undermine the foundation of safe and sound financial markets by intentionally avoiding basic, fundamental obligations that apply to exchanges, all the while collecting approximately $1.35 billion in trading fees from U.S. customers. Beyond the risks imposed on the U.S. financial system, Binance's activities impacted populations beyond investors in ways that cannot be measured in dollars and cents. As evidenced by the internal chats of Binance's CCO and others, Binance recognized that its platform was used to facilitate criminal activity, including terrorist financing, but chose to turn a blind eye, all in the name of profits. More disturbing, Binance and its leaders sought to dupe and indoctrinate their employees and customers, building a cult-like following premised on circumventing their own compliance controls to maximize corporate profits above all else. As charged in the CFTC complaint filed in March of this year and set forth in the consent order, Binance made deliberate, strategic, and calculated decisions to evade federal law over a period of nearly 4 years. Binance, under Zhao's direction and control, knowingly solicited and accepted orders from US-based customers to trade digital asset commodity derivatives products and operated an exchange for the trading of futures, options, swaps, and leveraged retail commodity transactions. Throughout this time period, Binance never registered with the CFTC as is required under US law. The resolution of the action against Binance and Zhao within just 8 months of its filing solidifies the CFTC's reputation as the proven leader in the civil enforcement space when it comes to digital assets. We are stalwart in ensuring CFTC registrants comply with our statute and regulations, which serve to protect broader financial health, and that directly impacts millions of American investors. Binance failed to diligently supervise its derivatives markets activities and miscarried requirements to implement adequate anti-money laundering, know your customer, and customer identification programs required for certain CFTC registrants. These provisions serve to protect all Americans from those who seek to use the financial markets to facilitate criminal activities, including domestic and international terrorism. As there remain certain classes of registrants who have lesser requirements, I believe our action here underscores what we could accomplish in CFTC markets with broader authority. American investors, small and large, have demonstrated eagerness to incorporate digital asset products into their portfolios. It is our duty to ensure that when they do so, the full protections afforded by our regulatory oversight are in place, and that illegal and illicit conduct is swiftly addressed. When, as here, an entity goes even further, deliberately avoiding to employ meaningful access controls, intentionally avoiding knowing customers' identities, and actively concealing the presence of US customers on its platforms, there is no question that the CFTC will strike hard and aggressively. I want to commend the incredible work of Candy Hahn, Joseph Plott, Catherine Paulson, Joseph Patrick, Matthew Edelstein, Elizabeth Pendleton, Scott Williamson, and Robert Howell. I'd also like to acknowledge our Director of Enforcement, Ian McGinley, and Principal Deputy Director and Chief Counsel, Gretchen Lowe. Thank you.
Evan, Christina?
One on topic and one off topic question, if you will indulge. Depends on the question. On the on topic, based on the allegations of this and some of the other cases that you brought, I'm wondering whether the concern in the industry about the ability of some of these startup companies, some of the smaller companies, to abide by this very costly regulatory and legal regimen that the United States requires, whether it will mean that you can't really do virtual currency and have this industry thrive and some of the cutting edge things that Lisa and Monica just mentioned with that very heavy burden of regulatory compliance. I'm wondering whether you have a message for the industry when it comes to that. And then if I can ask my off-topic question, we're expecting at any moment the Israeli government and some of the other parties to announce an agreement for the release of hostages being held by Hamas. If you can comment on that, and also just what the Justice Department and some of the other agencies that are represented here are doing to respond to the attacks in Israel on October 7th. We know, obviously, that Hamas has had a presence here in the United States, and the concern about how they raise money, including, of course, by cryptocurrency, is something that is on everyone's mind. I'm wondering what you're doing about that in light of what happened.
All right, let me start with the off topic. I was in a meeting this morning with national security officials, law enforcement officials, and the president regarding fentanyl. And he told the press that his team has been actively negotiating over possibility of bringing home some of the hostages. They thought that we were very close to being able to do that, but that he couldn't say anything more at that time. And I also can't say anything more at this time. With respect to the deaths of Americans, we always investigate deaths of Americans. And we are actively investigating the deaths of the Americans using all the tools available to us. We have, I think, as the FBI director said at a recent all-threats hearing before the judiciary, and as I've said, we are investigating Hamas connections in the United States particularly with respect to financial support, and that includes cryptocurrency. But we are also concerned about the possibility of more kinetic problems that they could cause, and we're investigating that. Now, I've talked a lot, so on the on-topic question, I will say you follow the law. You don't get a special benefit because you think that what you're doing is better for society, or better for small business, or better for big business, or better for international. The United States has laws, and everybody, including cryptocurrency platforms, have to follow the law.
Chris Summaries.
There's been a lot of concern about how unregulated the cryptocurrency markets are. You were able to get these guilty pleas. It took a long time. I'm just wondering, how do you feel like realistically the significance of these guilty pleas are? What do you believe it could? What kind of impact could it actually have on the cryptocurrency markets? And then just a quick follow up is, there is criticism that this is not this isn't significant enough. That there might be a situation in which nobody goes to jail, and the penalty itself, Binance is able to pay that penalty. How do you respond to that criticism?
I think I'm going to call on Nicole Argentieri, who's the Acting Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, to answer most of the questions you're talking about. The broader ones that have to do with regulation, it's possible Secretary Yellen or the CFTC chair would address. Where'd you go? Oh, over here. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So I'll take the second question first. I think looking at the pleas today, by every possible measure, these are some of the most significant penalties that the department has ever imposed on a financial institution. Not only is it one of the largest penalties imposed against a financial institution, this is the largest penalty that's ever been imposed on a money services business. It's the first corporate resolution with a cryptocurrency exchange, and it's the first resolution with an MSB for sanctions violations. And the financial penalty it's not the only significant part of the resolution. Binance, which is the parent holding company, is agreeing to plead guilty. And as part of that, we're going to impose a monitor for 3 years. The company has to enhance its compliance program and to continue to cooperate with the department. So we think it's quite a significant resolution. In addition, the agreement with the company requires Zhao to step down from his role as CEO and prohibits him from any present or future involvement in operating or managing Binance. So we think this is a very significant resolution. In what tools do we have and what should people take away from today? I think that today's actions show that if you serve U.S. customers, you must comply with U.S. law. U.S. financial institutions are the gatekeepers for the safety and security of our financial system. And because Binance served a substantial amount of U.S. customers, it was a U.S. financial institution that was required to comply with anti-money laundering laws. And what those laws say is that Binance had to have an effective anti-money laundering compliance program, including procedures to know its customers and to monitor for suspicious activity. And what happened instead is Binance and Zhao prioritized profit over compliance. And that failure to implement effective AML procedures led Binance to cause U.S. customers to transact with customers in Iran that violated U.S. sanctions.
Treasury or CFTC want to? The podium is yours.
Well, just very briefly, I agree with the comments that were just made. We actually have rather strong legal authorities to police this type of activity. Virtual currency exchanges are financial institutions. Financial institutions of all sizes are required to comply with AML, CFT, and sanctions obligations that they have. And cryptocurrency or virtual currency exchanges have those obligations as well. And I think today's actions show that we're very serious about enforcing the strong regulations that are already in place to make sure that illegal transactions are not fostered by cryptocurrency entities. This is a regime, just as banks can flourish, meeting these obligations. This is a regime that can support responsible innovation. It's not meant to end cryptocurrency activities, but to the extent they occur, it must be consistent with U.S. law.
I'll just say from a market's perspective and distinguishing Secretary Yellen's comments about AML and KYC, I've seen and we've seen gaps in the current regulatory structure around digital assets. I've advocated for filling in some of these gaps, specifically around commodity tokens. And I do think if we're able to do that, obviously with Congress's help, we can prevent these actions from happening and not have to be here after the fact. Some of the traditional tools of registration, surveillance, examinations, they've worked well for decades in the U.S. financial system for both market regulators. And we think those types of tools around digital assets, if improved and expanded, would certainly help in preventing some of these bad actions from happening again in the future.
All right, thank you. Stefania from Financial Times.
Hello. I had a question both for the DOJ and Treasury. So when it comes to the types of priorities, enforcement priorities in crypto that the DOJ has had, there was a big focus obviously on digital platforms that commit crimes or that at least let them happen. We've obviously seen the DOJ bring big cases now against Binance, FTX. Treasury separately has also increasingly taken actions against crypto players when it comes to money laundering or sanctions violations. So in light of these actions, having taken these actions in the market so far, what are your priorities now, both for the DOJ and Treasury going forward when it comes to crypto oversight? Are you thinking of deploying different types of strategies, especially since we're seeing a growing aspect and angle when it comes to national security concerns beyond, say, a financial stability concern when it comes to these crypto platforms?
Great question. I'm going to let the deputy begin the answer for the Justice Department and kick it over to Matt if we need on national security.
Thanks very much for the question, Stefania. I mean, first thing I'd say is these are incredibly complicated and resource-intensive and time-consuming cases. And so we need the resources, and we're willing to and have, as we've shown today and in prior cases, deploy those resources. So we're always looking to add our resources and agent investigators, prosecutors. Second thing I'd say is you have seen both with our actions today and in prior cases that we will be relentless in using every tool that we currently have to deploy against those who seek to use technologies in a way that abuse those platforms, that cause the or don't prevent the use of those platforms for illicit activities. But we always want to make sure that we're working with Congress and others to make sure those tools that we have today stay up to date, right? We know that the bad guys and the threat actors will try to exploit every crack and crevice they can to exploit technologies, to exploit gaps in the law. You've heard the CFTC chairman talk about some of the tools he needs. So we want to make sure the existing laws stay up to date. And then I think we very much want to work with those in Congress and others who want to ensure that we can deploy every tool possible to make sure that the technologies that can help our prosperity and help our financial system also aren't ripe for abuse by illicit actors. That's why you've seen us do things like create the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team. That's why, and Matt Olson can speak to this, that's why they created the National Security Cyber Unit. Because what we're seeing is more and more convergence of the exploitation, both of the financial system and corporate crime in the national security space. I think I'll ask Matt to come up, and I'm sure Treasury Secretary Yellen might want to speak to this as well.
Thank you, Lisa. I would just say briefly that as we respond to the nature of the threats we see today around the world, whether we're talking about terrorism, we're talking about nation-state adversaries like Russia and China and Iran, we are increasingly using our tools, sanctions enforcement, export control enforcement, cybersecurity from nation-state adversaries. We're increasingly seeing the ability to use the tools that we have in the Justice Department from a law enforcement perspective to better protect the country by going after those threats, using those tools in new and innovative ways. So to your question, we are constantly adjusting our approach and our priorities to meet that threat on a daily basis. And I think this case is just one more example of that.
Well, I would just add that I think what the case today shows is that Treasury's priority is to vigorously pursue investigations that involve sanctions violations or violations of AML-CFT obligations that put our nation at risk, that degrade the global financial system, that aid illicit activity and terrorism, and particularly in cases like this where there are violations of a truly egregious nature. So as I've said, well, of course, we want to make sure that our tools stay up to date and are adjusted so that we can address emerging threats. We believe we have strong tools, and we've been increasingly deploying them to counter this type of abuse.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Is it done, Goody? I think it's done.
Yep, that's it.
How did this all become about Hamas suddenly? I'm trying to get away from the war. Just for the panel, initial thoughts. Dennis, I know you wanted to jump in. Mike, Travis, Simon, everyone. Would love Ben is here as well. Would love your thoughts. And then I'm going to read out. There's a tweet by CZ. There's another tweet by Brian Armstrong that I think I'm going to read in a bit. They're pretty long. So I'm going to pin them at the top as well.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, certainly not surprised by these actions. This is something that I have followed for some time now with CZ and their operations operating strongly outside of the current regulatory regimes. In fact, it's a common conversation amongst us within the policy realm. For those of you that don't know me, I am Dennis Porter, the CEO and co-founder of Satoshi Action Fund. We're an advocacy group. We go around, we talk to politicians all day long and try to get them to adopt Bitcoin and digital assets in a friendly manner. So oftentimes we're sort of confronted with these conversations about what's going on with the bad actors in the space. And I couldn't honestly be happier to see us moving beyond this point where we are getting rid of these folks who are flaunting the current regulatory regimes and are dragging down the space in general. Bad actors are a limit to our ability to adopt this technology. Not only does it happen on from a financial perspective, it also happens in the realm of Bitcoin mining, where I spend a lot of time as well. We want to make sure that we're doing everything possible to limit the ability for bad actors to operate successfully within the United States, because at the end of the day, pretty much everybody in this call, I'm sure on this panel, is a good actor. And all we need to do is make sure that we're building proper regulatory regimes to ensure that those good actors can operate successfully without also having to deal with overly burdensome regulations, which I think was a really important point that one of the reporters brought up. They mentioned, hey, yeah, people want to operate within the United States, but you're going to create a regulatory regime that's so strong that these people won't, even the good actors won't be able to operate. And I think that we need to make sure as we're moving forward,
What do you think?
That.
What are your thoughts on the answer to that question, Dennis? Like, pretty much, we don't care. The law is the law.
No, so we certainly need to be getting active, not only as me as a Bitcoiner, those in the space that are crypto folks that I work with quite a bit as well, need to be working highly aggressively to get involved in these conversations because if we leave government to be done by the regulators and the bureaucrats, ultimately what's going to happen is they're going to create rules that we can't comply to. And so we need to get involved, we need to get engaged, be in the dialogue, in the conversation. That's why I do what I do, to make sure that, yes, if they set regulations, which will probably be something that could be frustrating for a good actor to deal with, we just need to make sure that we do not set regulations that are impossible for a good actor to deal with. And part of that is going to take place in DC, but part of that is also going to take place at the state level. You saw Texas passing its proof of reserves bill. This is to help create more transparency for the space. We need a lot more bills like that. And in fact, it's something that me and my team work actively on and engage on, because we want to make sure that the United States is a leader on this technology. But real quickly, I want to say that this stuff has been coming for a long time. I was speaking to multiple U.S. Senate offices where this is a major concern, but also to the former director of cybersecurity at the White House. So this is something that they've been talking about for a long time, figuring out how they can limit these bad actors. And I just think that this is going to be the beginning. You're going to see more actions take place. I mean, we already saw what's going on with FinCEN. They're going to keep pushing that, and they're going to keep pushing that. And unfortunately,
but would you say?
true.
But Dennis, would you say the worst is over though? It's none of the big guys left except Tether and to an extent DCG.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I won't comment on DCG, but certainly Tether is one that needs to be probably visited by them. I'm not saying myself that I think that they're a problem or that they are sort of skirting the law enough to have someone like the United States government bring down the full force of their operations on them. But definitely, certainly, they are interested in Tether, and they're interested in figuring out whether or not Tether is in compliance. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, this is stuff that is going to keep happening. And I've been trying to tell people for a very long time that, you know, Bitcoin and crypto and digital assets, they might be borderless, they might be digital, they might live in the metaverse, but me and you and the people on this phone call do not. And the government knows that, and they know that they can apply their pressures. Now, this is not me saying that I agree broadly with all the things that the government does in these situations, but it sort of doesn't take a whole lot of thought process to know that they're going to use the full arm, the full length of their powers to be able to go after companies like these. And it's just sort of insane to hear these reports about how the CZ was like sort of flaunting right back at the United States, almost like encouraging them to take action against them. And so ultimately, I'm glad that we're here, and I'll refer to Mike Alfred and say that I agree with him. I think that when you get rid of the CZs, you get rid of the SBFs, then all of a sudden you're moving towards a world where true adoption can take place, and ultimately where Bitcoin is going to be going up much higher than where it is today.
Mike,
Mario, if I could just add to,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Jason. No,
Yeah.
go ahead, Jason. We'll go to Mike afterwards.
Thanks. Yeah, so Jason Brett, ex-FDIC regulator. I also write for Forbes. And I just wanted to thank Dennis and Mike for the work that they've been doing on this, and just comment on what Dennis said about how he was flaunting it. I put up in the post in the Nest, Mario, an article that I was a researcher on, written in 2020, where we did research to show how CZ had this plan that he called the Tai Chi plan to try to upset U.S. regulators. It was denied by CZ, and actually I was sued personally by CZ, as was Forbes, as was Michael Del Castillo, the writer of the article, and that was eventually dropped. I'm not happy today, but I do feel like there's a little bit of justice here. And the only comment I wanted to add to what Dennis is saying is it wasn't so much flaunting, it was this Tai Chi strategy where they specifically wanted to waste regulators' time and make it look like they wanted to be compliant. And in that, their idea was that the US regulators would then spend their force of time trying to figure out and do all these things. Like part of their Tai Chi plan was to make the regulators, talk about how they wanted to comply with the Howey test of the SEC, even though they didn't. And I think ultimately what you're seeing today is frustration on the behalf of regulators realizing finally that their time was wasted, and that at least some of the reporting I was involved in 2019, 2020 has really come to fruition because he was breaking laws. Now, the part I think is really important for everyone to understand is this should not be seen as an indictment of crypto. This is not like a Sam Bankman-Fried. This is like
I think it's the opposite of that. I'll let you continue.
Yeah.
I think it's the opposite of the way it was handled.
Yeah, no, and it's more like the Arthur Hayes and BitMEX scenario. They're publicizing and using this specific case to do a launched assault against Bitcoin and crypto. Mario, yeah, that's exactly what, yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of the launch of thought, like I've said this before. First, Jason, is there any surprises in that same question I want to ask Mike and Travis and other speakers? Is there any surprises, anything mentioned in that press conference that wasn't clear in the indictment or that could indicate, their approach to crypto moving forward?
I think what was a little bit of a surprise to me sounded like this notion of a policy that if you're not following the rules, basically the US government is going to come after you. The industry for years has been asking for clear rules, and I think it's important to acknowledge it's an emerging asset class, it's an emerging technology. And as a former banking regulator who saw the financial crisis happen, this is different than banking. So what it sounds like they're sending is a very chilling message to every single exchange across the US that if you don't play by the rules, by their rules, by the bankers' rules, that this could happen to you. And that to me is a very chilling message and a very concerning message. And quite frankly, I'm disappointed that it was shared in that context. I don't think using this case as a way of scaring everyone into having to follow rules when it's evident. You have senators and representatives, people Dennis is talking to, who are working on coming up with policy for new regulations because they've admitted that they don't even know how to address the BSA in crypto. So for them to just come out with this blanket thing today to say BSA AML wasn't followed, so CZ's going to jail, it's just not that simple. There needs to be policy and new laws to address this properly that allows crypto to operate, which, by the way, will then help with things like Hamas, help with illicit finance, not just Hamas, but just illicit finance issues of if you're worried about terrorists using this money. If you have a properly regulated space, then that stuff will start to dwindle away. And there isn't a lot of that there anyway. So that we should be embracing the idea that Congress can come up with proper laws to regulate the space in this
And
country.
do you think, from what you've heard there, Mike, I'll go to you right after. Just one last quick question, Jason. In terms of CZ going to jail, what's the likelihood in your opinion? And when do we find out? Unless I missed it.
Well, we're going to have to wait for the sentencing, but I'll just put it back this way and to anyone else in the panel, Mario. But I think there's some statistic about the number of billionaires that actually do jail time. I think like Sam Bankman-Fried would be like number 2 out of like 10,000 billionaires that have actually been tried. Billionaires don't usually go to jail. So just my own skepticism is he's not going to do any jail time. I think Sam Bankman-Fried was a little bit of a different case, but the odds are against him serving a day in jail, in my opinion, just from what we've seen of the history of billionaires who have to face jail time.
Just as a quick comment to that real quick, I think that also what Jason nailed in on is this idea of the rules that are set by the bankers or set by the current sort of financial rulers of the world. And just want to highlight how important I think it is that we get involved and actually start changing some of what those rules are.
So, Mario, let me jump in here because obviously I've been very vocal about this whole issue. I started to talk about it the week FTX went down in November. I went on Bloomberg. I said Binance is one of the most problematic companies. It's a company to watch. Today, for some of us who got yelled down by people in these spaces and on Twitter, it's sort of vindication because it's the end of the line for the group of people who said it was all FUD, it was all nothing. Because the reality is CZ did not have to come to Washington today. He did not have to file that plea. He could have fought. He could have hid, right? He could have avoided all of this. But the writing was on the wall. And so nobody in his position would have agreed to a deal at all if they felt they hadn't committed any crimes. That said, I think it's a win for CZ. I think CZ is probably one of the biggest winners in all of this because he gets to keep his equity. He gets to continue to probably stay free because if he didn't settle here, he'd be pursued for the next decade or two by the U.S. government all over the world. And so, yeah, Binance is defanged. There's a monitor in there. Their existing business model is dead. Binance is likely to look like BitMEX in a year or two. It's going to shrink. But CZ is not going to jail. CZ pays a relatively minor $50 million fine. And I think consumers are better protected because the wash trading from Merit Peak and Sigma Chain and some of these other CZ-controlled accounts and market makers on Binance will stop. A lot of that trading will flow to the new U.S. regulated, exchanges that are going to have to fully register with the SEC going forward, irrespective of what the CFTC thinks. Like they're going to have to cooperate on that, and they're laying the foundation for the institutionalization of Bitcoin this cycle. Which now the road is paved. BlackRock, Fidelity, and Invesco can roll their tanks down this newly paved road where Binance is essentially defanged. That's the story here. All the people who said it was FUD were wrong. All the people who complained and yelled and said you're just making stuff up, they were wrong. And everything that they said today on that stage, even though they were old and they weren't that eloquent, essentially, we were all vindicated.
And one other thing, congratulations. I'm glad you feel vindicated. The press conference relative to the indictment, is there anything in the tone, anything they said that kind of stuck out for you, similar to what Jason mentioned earlier about the
Honestly, Mario, like just candidly, when you listen to government representatives speak, you can tell that they're really not that good. They're not the cutting edge. They have teams of people. There's some young analysts who did a lot of the actual work there who are far smarter. But if you call it Binance repeatedly on stage,
exactly.
you were literally just called there to take a dog and pony show victory lap, which I was not impressed by. There was only like the one young woman that actually seemed to know what she was talking about. The CFTC guy obviously is pretty sharp as well. But like the reality is, like Yellen has no idea what she's doing. She didn't even sell more debt when the interest rates were 300 bips lower. So like, no, I wasn't impressed. The government did what they had to do, and they wheel out these geriatric folks at the end to take a victory lap. But the reality is, like, we were all talking about the details and minute detail of every single thing they said 12 months ago. It was already known by people who were paying attention. So no, not impressed, but again, vindication for people who saw this coming for a while.
Travis?
I mean, I don't know. We'll just have to see. I mean, this is a good outcome for this.
I was going to say, you sound like you're a bit teary. Your crime is getting very emotional for you, Travis.
Oh, no.
A big day for you.
I wasn't paying that much attention, so I wasn't really thinking about what I was going to say, which is pretty funny in front of this many people. But no, this is a good thing.
After all this time of you ringing the alarm on Binance, going through all the attacks similar to Mike about Binance, when your day comes, you're not paying attention. I think you're making this up and you're crying, but it's okay. Go ahead. Give us your thoughts.
I told Rand, I promised Rand I wasn't going to dunk on him. I promised him. So, I don't feel any need to like stomp on graves or dunk or whatever. And, I think this is a much better outcome than it could have been, than there was real risk that it could have been. I think we still need to kind of see how this shakes out. But this is a very positive outcome. So I'm happy.
Wasn't
Mario, real quick, to answer one of the questions you've been asking as I've been reading through this stuff, one of the things that's hidden in here is a sentencing that's postponed for 6 months. So in May of next year, there will be a sentencing hearing for CZ, which could be the criminal charges or the prison time that you're talking about.
But that's the sentencing, that's what he pled guilty for. That's the sentencing we have to wait for. Or is it a separate one?
Exactly. It's just what's listed in here, and you keep asking about the prison time, so I'm saying that like that's he could be facing it.
No, he. I know that's what I said earlier. So there is a possibility, and we won't know till sentencing. So what I was trying to, my question is, was there any hints in the press conference? And the hint that I got is that it doesn't look like there's going to be any jail time, because I think one of the questions was, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but one of the questions was, is this really harsh enough? He didn't get any prison time, blah 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 blah. And they didn't correct that person. They started saying, but we did get this and that, instead of saying, we don't know if he's going to get prison time. So it just kind of hinted to me that there is no prison time. But that's that's just speculation. There is before we continue to Dave, Tiger, and everyone else, there's a tweet here by CZ. I'm going to read it out, and if someone, Goody, if you could pin that up at the top, would be great, please. So I'll read it out quickly for the audience. Today, I stepped down as CEO of Binance. Admittedly, it was not easy to let go emotionally, but I know it is the right thing to do. I made mistakes, and I must take responsibility. This is the best for our community, for Binance, and for myself. Binance is no longer a baby. It is time for me to let it walk and run. I know Binance will continue to grow and excel with the deep bench it has. I'm pleased to announce Richard Teng, our now former global head of regional markets, has been named as CEO of Binance, and he's got a tweet as well, which we'll read. And then there's a tweet from Brian Armstrong hitting I didn't read it, but someone said he's hitting back at Binance. Richard is a highly qualified leader, and with over 3 decades of financial services and regulatory experience, he will navigate the company through the next period of growth. He will ensure Binance delivers on our next phase of security, transparency, compliance, and growth. Prior to joining Binance, Richard was CEO of Financial Services Regulatory Authority at Abu Dhabi Global Markets, Chief Regulatory Officer of the Singapore Exchange, and Director of Corporate Finance in the Monetary Authority of Singapore. With Richard and the entire team, I'm confident that the best days for Binance and the crypto industry lay ahead. As a shareholder and former CEO, he's pointing out he's still a shareholder and former CEO with historical knowledge of our company, I will remain available to the team to consult as needed, consistent with the framework set out in our US agency resolutions. What's next for me? I will take a break first. I've not had a single day of real phone off break for the last 6.5 years. After that, my current thinking is that I'll probably do some passive investing, being a minority token shareholder in startups in areas of blockchain, Web3, DeFi, AI, and biotech. I'm happy that I will finally have more time to spend looking at DeFi. Is he saying that he's not going to jail, or is that kind of expected from him? I can't see myself being CEO driving a CEO driving a startup again. I'm content being a one-shot lucky entrepreneur. Should there be listeners, I may be open to being a coach mentor to a small number of upcoming entrepreneurs privately. If for nothing else, I can at least tell them what not to do. On that note, I'm proud to point out that in our resolution with the US agencies, they quote, they, number one, do not allege that Binance misappropriated any user funds, and two, do not allege that Binance engaged in any market manipulation. So he's kind of pointing out that, hey, this is nothing to do with what FTX has done. This is incomparable to FTX. I think he's just really highlighting that, which I agree. Funds, and hold on, Mike, before I continue, last thing, do you agree with those 2 points that Binance did not misappropriate any user funds and did not engage in market manipulation?
Absolutely not. But it doesn't really matter because these settlements are not always about the truth. You always deny liability for things that the government doesn't require you to basically admit. So they cared about the money laundering and they cared about the sanctions. They didn't care so much about the financial crimes.
Why?
Part. And that,
why wouldn't they? But why?
Because maybe they can't prove it yet, and maybe that's why the SEC recused themselves from this settlement. And by the way, I apologize. I'm on a 10-mile run
that's
right
okay.
now.
That's okay.
Up.
But yeah, that's okay. But for, if they've got an observatory now and they're going to be going through all the books, are you saying that there's still a possibility they could find this? Because I'd be surprised they haven't found it since 2018, Mike. I'm sure they would have found it. They would have found it in their multi-investigation.
But Mario, you got to think about this a little bit more deeply, right? Like CZ has literally run the entire company by himself. There was no CFO, there was no board, there was no governance, there was no audit ever. So to claim that because they did the settlement, which by the way they provided the
you're cutting out. Let me read out the rest of the tweet while Mike's mic comes back, and I see a few more hands up. Well, it's kind of a bit of a bomb to drop at the end, Mike. We thought everything was over, and you're saying, no, shit, there could be a lot more. Funds are safe for you. With that, I look forward to seeing the new leadership take the reins. Please join me in congratulating Richard on his well-deserved promotion. Onwards, CZ. Mike, on that last point.
Of course it's not over, guys. Like, the SEC's not done. It doesn't resolve any of their allegations, right? So it's not over, and there will be more to the story, but the hardest part is over because it's unlike.
Okay, I understand. The mic is cutting out as you go on your run. Before I read Richard's, so the new CEO's tweet, and I read Brian Armstrong's tweet, let's get some more thoughts on this. I see Zach is up as well. Zach, thoughts? And we'll go to Tiger. Tiger, thoughts while Zach unmutes.
Yeah, look, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm inclined to say that it's more likely that CZ does not see a prison cell. I think it's more likely an Arthur Hayes situation where maybe he's on house arrest for whatever it is. I think Hayes was on house arrest for 6 months or something in a very nice house in Miami. So that's a pretty good deal in my opinion. I mean, let's see how Asia opens, because when this news was dropped, it was like 5 a.m. in Asia. So let's see how things go. I could see some liquidity issues in alts. Obviously, Binance was prime a liquidity venue for alts. So interested to see what happens there. You know, I don't think I don't think Bitcoin and ETH are going anywhere. You'll probably see some volatility, but we'll see what happens. I mean, like I said, it's a good day. I think that it's very clear that the people who criticized Binance for a long time and were called crazy and, idiots like myself feel vindicated today, like Mike Alfred said. It's a good day.
But it's important to point out, Tiger, that a lot of the allegations that were made are unlikely to be true, and I'm saying unlikely in a very, very.
Yeah. I think the main ones. I think the main ones were announced. Though. I mean, obviously, I think that there's some that are left out. It doesn't mean that they're not true. But I think the OFAC violations were very, very obvious, and those have a big penalty attached to them, as you can see with the proposed fine today and the consequences. It's just crazy that CZ is on U.S. soil. I think the last time he was on U.S. soil was when he worked for Bloomberg or something. It was a while, right?
It's all over for him. EYC, I'll bring you back. I see you requesting. I'll bring you up in a bit. Let's go to Dave.
Hey, Mario,
Simon,
real
Gary.
quick,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Mike.
my mic. I just want to say that this settlement was excruciating, right? It took 9 or 10 months. There were probably dozens of attorneys participating, and so of course you horse trade and you say, hey, we're not going to admit to this market manipulation thing, but we will admit to this other thing since that's the thing that's politically important. So I think the thing that swung this case right at the end, most likely, is the fact that Hamas and the terrorist funding is a hot button issue politically. So when they gave on that point, they released all of the market manipulation and all the other things that have happened because it doesn't matter to them because they don't win any political points for that. It has no bearing on whether those things are true. People need to understand the nuance.
Or they just, Mike, he went out of his way to say these claims are not untrue. It's not someone asked him, he said, no, they're untrue. He went out of his way to put it in the tweet.
How many times did he lie up until this point? He lied about saying that they didn't do the things he now admitted to doing. So why would you believe that anything else he says is true? He doesn't have a track record.
Which one specifically did he lie about? I don't know.
He said we don't facilitate money laundering and terrorism. That's all bullshit. And he said we don't trade against our customers and we don't commingle and we don't lend out Bitcoin and BUSD is fully backed. I mean, he said dozens of things.
Yeah, but he's not. But there's no allegation. So that he wasn't found guilty of trading against his customers or wash trading.
That's literally my point. My point is that because he wasn't found guilty of it, it's not the point is that they horse traded for 10 months. And the thing that finally swung it was the political stuff going on. And as long as he said, yes, I did those things, they said, okay, we won't go after you now, which is why the SEC had to recuse themselves because the SEC is still not comfortable probably with some of those other market related issues.
Gary?
Yeah, I'm curious about the collective opinion of 6 months from now, 12 months from now. How does this affect, DeFi if DeFi continues? So you see maybe the history of having a drinking age in the United States. When I was 18, it was legal, and it changed to being 21. So it became the responsibility of the vendor to make sure that the kid wasn't buying alcohol. Or in the case of driving a car, you can buy an automobile without having a driver's license or insurance. So is it the responsibility of the manufacturer for a Lamborghini to say don't drive above the speed limit?
How's that? But how does the Binance centralized exchange ruling?
So my question is, does this mean that a central exchange becomes more siloed and is more of a fiat on-ramp, off-ramp without basically participating in market making? That's my question.
Dave, do you want to take that one?
Well, there's absolutely no reason why an exchange should have to participate in market making. It's insane that they've ever been allowed to do so. And frankly, customers should have been concerned. I mean, I could go through specifics, but the fact is the market makers, of which I'm friends with quite a few of them, will all go to exchanges that have people who are taking liquidity. That's never the problem. The fact that FTX at its height had people trading on FTX knowing that Alameda had a golden ticket and just assumed it was going to be a slight expense to them was there. But I want to go to something Mike said because I think it's really, really important, Mary. I'm going to back you up on this. The fact of the matter is, what we saw the people on stage all said, I forgot which one said it or where it is, but it's very clear that one of the conditions of this deal was no more public statements from CZ and Binance. That was very clear. We all heard that. It was in writing in the press releases I saw. Yet CZ put out in that tweet information such as client funds are safe, as I won't say what SAFU stands for, but whatever. Anyway, that customer funds are safe. I don't believe there's even a snowball's chance in hell that he would have been allowed to say that if he wasn't allowed to say that, meaning that there's no way that the DOJ is coming after them for customer funds are safe. Now, if you believe that the SEC recused themselves because they think that that's not true, then there's a bridge I used to be able to see from my old apartment that I'd love to sell you. The SEC not being there, I think, is meaningful for different reasons. Their attempt to try to get them for trading unregistered securities, I think will not do very well because it does not have support politically. That's the other point that's being made. But I don't think that there's another shoe to drop with as far as Binance is concerned. I do agree with Mike where Mike says it's going, which is, I think that this is a wound. Is it a mortal wound? I don't know, but it's a big wound, and I think you're going to see an ongoing rotation to markets that are doing things in a better way. And I don't want to shill for other markets, but several of their competitors are doing things to split custody from the exchange, et cetera, and doing things in a much better way.
Dave, I don't
Mario,
actually
jump in for a
disagree
quick-
with I want to jump in because he actually addressed my points.
Yeah, no
I actually
problem.
don't.
I just
I
wanted
don't.
to
I
update
don't think we
Mario on something
I
real
don't think
quick.
we disagree. I
Mike,
don't think we
can you
disagree.
hang on one sec? Could you hang on one sec, Mike?
Can you hang on because he addressed my point directly? I want to jump in on it.
Okay, I just wanted to add something for the audience regarding a New York Times report that just came out, so I'll go after you.
Okay, so real quick, Dave. I think you're probably right that that's what they think, but the reality is that there's never been an audit done. Period. The examiner has not been installed yet, and nobody other than CZ actually knows where all of the coins are and where all of the fiat is, and it's a highly complex organization that isn't run in that intelligent of a way. So the idea that because they settled for political reasons today, that there's no way that there's anything else, there's not another shoe to drop. Again, I think it's completely.
Oh, okay. Well, you're right. Okay. We all have to admit, Mike, and you and I've talked about this. There's the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. I think that we can clearly say that there's no smoking gun that's pointing to misused or missing customer funds. I think that we can agree to. I certainly would not be crazy enough to say that there's no other thing out there that could have happened. But look, I'm actually stunned to see BNB still trading at around 239 and change. I mean, given all this, but whatever. Markets will do what markets are going to do. All I'm saying is CZ would not have been allowed to make that statement if there was anything close to a smoking gun. That's all I was saying.
So I'm surprised you made any statement at all, Mike. Apologies. Hey, Mario, you were asking before. The New York Times just reported as part of his guilty plea. So for Changpeng Zhao, it looks like he's pled guilty to money laundering violations, and according to the New York Times, he's agreed to pay a $50 million fine, and the government is seeking an 18-month prison sentence, so 1.5-year prison sentence for Mr. Zhao, which is the maximum under federal guidelines according to senior Justice Department officials. So it looks like a year and a half.
Did that just come out?
That just came out. It's in the New York Times. I'll put it up in the nest. And again, Mike, sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to throw that out, Mario.
Oh wow. Okay, that's pretty major. Do you think he was? Okay, Joe is coming up. Let me get Joe up.
That's still part of that was about almost close to an hour ago, right? Though, so I think this is still part and parcel.
The 18 months jail sentence. I didn't. Has anyone seen that?
It was about 45 minutes ago or so. Yeah. I did see that in the New York Times reporting, but I think there are folks on here who are hypothesizing that he wouldn't get jail time for a variety of reasons. But I think it's a little bit unclear, right? It's still murky waters ahead, and there's definitely a lot of interesting things. I think somebody brought up. I've been perplexed by where BNB is trading. I think someone just brought that up. I mean, it's barely. I mean, it's down 4%. Still, $30-something billion market cap. The larger crypto market's pretty much flat on the day, right? Bitcoin's down 0.63%, Ethereum down 0.57%. I just don't understand how this is not moving markets more. I mean, this is a gigantic impact on markets. I guess we all think there's efficient markets, but one wonders when you see the movements right now.
Yeah, EYC, just to address your question, it just came up, meaning I just pulled up this New York Times article earlier in the space. I don't know if you were here, Mario, and all of us were sort of asking. We just didn't see the New York Times report about whether he was going to face jail time at all. So,
yeah, that's the first time I see this. I know there's another piece by New York Times. Joe, have you seen the jail time beforehand?
Yeah, we talked about this. I don't know, 3 hours ago, 4 hours ago. This was in the government.
They're seeking. Yeah, but so they're seeking an 18 months jail sentence, but we don't know if he's going to be found guilty or not. Okay, my bad. I thought there's an update on that. Okay.
So just so you know how this works, the government filed a memorandum regarding plea proceedings. They filed it yesterday. It was sealed and then unsealed earlier today. And I was reading from it and posting portions of it. We don't have all of the attachments to it, but the actual overview of the plea agreements seem to intimate that. In the statement of facts, we also have that specifically as well. That will be unsealed later today as well, probably this evening. But the point is that, the government is absolutely recommending jail time. Anybody who's saying that he's not going to at least get the recommendation, it will come. Now, whether the judge orders it, that's a different story.
Okay, understood. All right, Simon?
Yeah, to me, one of the more interesting parts of this, listening to CZ's tweet and then also comparing that with what's said in the press release or report, is the importance of being able to separate your ideologies, your politics, and being the CEO of a regulated financial institution. And quite often, those are in loggerhead, and if you get it wrong, you end up with a $4.3 billion fine, an 18 months potential prison sentence, and being on the side of this. So as a Bitcoiner, it's important to realize that by taking the financial institution out of the middle, you do create immutable records of any crimes you commit. So, that's one part of it. And whether they start to use these centralized things to start leaking into more of the more aggressive FinCEN recommendations to try and start tackling, the decentralized bit and the peer-to-peer finance bit, that is a danger. And this will be used for that. As somebody that runs a regulated financial institution, you need to suspend often your beliefs and your political ideologies in order to ensure that doesn't impact. You just have to play by all of these rules, and all these rules apply, and they're going to get more and more aggressive. I think in the case of Binance, look for the re-onboarding of every single customer, what impact that will have. You need to have a risk score for every single customer. You need to do all those suspicious activity reports that they're going to be supervised by. You need to know how much someone's trading. You need to have transaction monitoring. You need to have screening. You need to have PEP sanction, all those things which they would have definitely be implementing, and probably will have one of the more aggressive regimes, especially as it goes into supervision. But also how quickly and at danger of, I don't want to derail or offend everybody, because Dave and I often debate on these matters on either side of the ideology or the politics. But the challenge of running a financial institution, there is obviously, this suddenly went into all the Israel-Hamas side, which is the hot topic to try and get it.
Yes.
But
can't get away from it.
But as somebody that runs a financial institution that believes that America is funding war crimes with IDF, that can't come into the ideology, and that doesn't get factored into the sanction regime. So a lot of this is also, political sides that you have to.
But how can it be? But Simon, how can it be political? And I want to read Richard Tang's tweet and then Brian Armstrong's. But how can it be political when it's been going on for so many years? You mean the outcome is a bit politically motivated, which is kind of Mike hinted at that earlier. The outcome is politically motivated, and possibly we could say that if it wasn't for politics, it could have been worse for Binance. But they got him to admit to. Mike is happy with this. So I think this is what Mike believes as well.
Yeah, it's more what I was trying to highlight is the challenge of running a financial institution, subscribing to a slightly different ideology that, America's committing many war crimes, and those don't get made into the sanction regime. And then you have to comply with those, even if it's, different to your political beliefs. And then that gets weaponized if you haven't got the middle part right by separating your political views from running a regulated financial institution. And so I think what this story is CZ came from an ideology and a political belief, and he was the story of this press release, was that if you don't separate your ideologies and your political beliefs, you end up with a financial institution that can put you in prison, and there will be massive consequences for not adhering to a politics which is actually very US centric.
Mr. Joe, I'll let you, Dave, I'll let you respond to this, and I'll go, and I'll read
Yeah, I'll
Richard
be
Teng's
quick.
tweet. And yeah, go ahead.
I mean, look, Simon and I, one of these days, we'll have an actual debate, maybe moderated on that other topic. But on this one, it's really simple. I have enormous respect for what CZ built. I think as an entrepreneur, he was amazing and he helped our industry, and that is true. But I actually think that the people on stage that we listened to had it right. I think he made his decisions not based on ideology, based on profit. I think that it was profitable to have American clients, and it was profitable to not worry about OFAC and Iran when in trading. I think it's as simple as that. I don't believe he was supporting Iranian ideology in any shape. If I did, I probably wouldn't be so complimentary to him. But what is absolutely true, and it was part of this, is that financial institutions have to file what's called SARs, suspicious activity reports. That has nothing to do with politics. And what is interesting about this, and why I believe that Mike is right about Binance kind of, I won't say going to irrelevance, but certainly not being dominant anymore, is now they're going to be forced to file suspicious activity reports anytime there's even a suspicion that somebody is doing something that might be money laundering or manipulative, etc. And probably some number, and I'd love the lawyers in the room to say it, but of suspicious activity reports filed, I'll bet you less than 1 in 5 are actually real, meaning that there can be a lot of false positives and a lot of clients getting reported upon. And I
It's
think
much
that's
worse
relevant.
than that, actually.
But why is it worse?
It's just the numbers much worse. Like, they basically, as Dave is saying, that like the entire space, all these reports are put in. Like, people will like have a miscolored bill because they think that it was taken from a bank heist, right? Like there's bills with like color on them, and they'll say, well, they'll put a SARS report in, and they'll put that right next to the SARS report of someone who's actually committing a pretty extravagant crime, and you have these piles and piles and piles, and really it's like there's so many not only false reports, but you have a lot of actual reports going in, and they say that there's some statistic out now, and it talks about how that basically the SARS are so overreported that it's all just like a giant like trash bin. They all just get thrown in there, and they don't do anything with them. So they ultimately don't get utilized. So they force you to go within a system, and then they don't actually enforce that system.
I'm going to read out the tweet. Joe, anything else to add before I read out the tweet?
Yeah, I think that you're kind of conflating two things. One, you're talking about the actual reporting of suspicious activity, but to even get to reporting and get to proper detection and compliance standpoint, you have to gather the original information. You have to do the proper KYC. You have to do the proper vetting of people trading on your platform. And if I had to make speculation, and this is just my speculation, I don't think they gather half of that when it comes to people trading on Binance outside of the United States.
But guys, Dave, I want to ask you a question, man. Like, just 2 days ago, I'm not sure if you were on that space, the Crypto Town Hall, where Rand said like the last Black Swan events that are pending is Binance and Tether, but I don't think there's anything with Tether. I think they've withstood everything, and they've proven that they've got full backing. There's nothing to be worried about after all these years. So then his last point of concern is Binance, and some people agreed with that. But with Binance out of the way, I just find it to be pretty clear. I know you can never say there's not going to be Black Swan events. That's why they're Black Swan events. But it's pretty clear that at least there's not, other than potentially, DCD to an extent and Tether, it seems the path is clear for finally a proper recovery or even a bull market, because we've just got to remove the last hanging cloud over the industry after SBF was found guilty.
Yeah, I mean that's true, but look, we all have PTSD after 2022. I mean, let's face it, but there have been plenty of corrections and bear markets in crypto, without Black Swan events, and so yes, I am more bullish today than I was this morning. There's no doubt. I'm not gonna lie. In the long term, but speculators will do what speculators are going to do. You're going to see a lot of volatility, because there's a lot of inflows and outflows. And every single bullish thing we've said, and I'm going to keep saying it to you, Mario, everything we've said are long-term bullish things that have nothing to do with fund flows, nothing to do with where speculators are putting their money. Remember, if Binance has to sell Bitcoin because they're holding it in treasury, or Ethereum because they're holding it in treasury to meet the payments that they now have to make, they're sellers, and somebody has to come along and buy that. Now, will they? Yeah, of course they will. Will it be volatility? Of course there will be. So, it's not this instant gratification, let's switch to a bull market kind of event, but it's certainly a good one. The only one that would be one of those would be spot ETF approved and people saying how much that they have teed up to go live, and as soon as that happens. But that's probably more likely next year at this point.
Wait,
Dave,
but
can I
isn't
ask
there
you a
this
quick
huge
question about
overhang
that?
still of these
Sorry.
major lawsuits against exchanges saying that all of these tokens are securities? Like, I feel like that is absolutely something that could still go hugely wrong if we actually get federal court rulings that Solana and Matic and Cardano and Algorand are securities. Like that could be a real problem for a bull market.
Yeah, it could, but I think that it's the major question doctrine and what's going on is probably a bigger deal. I mean, look, it is.
Do you think Coinbase is going to win on the major question doctrine?
I think if it goes to the Supreme Court, yeah, they'll win. But
I have a brick to sell you on that one.
Well, no, I mean, the fact of the matter is, even in this press conference, I mean, you have people at the CFTC are angling. It's all politics, right? It's U.S. politics trying to figure out who's going to have authority and control. You're right. That's a potential black swan event. There's no doubt.
Do you have any indication that courts are receptive to this major doctrines? Like, that is not how it's played out at all in federal court in any of the cases so far. That seems like a pretty ridiculous viewpoint.
At exchanges that any of this stuff are securities, and every time they're pressed, there's literally no chance for any of those issuers to have ever registered as securities. Literally no path to do so. So it really becomes a very interesting question, but that's a much longer conversation.
Could I ask just a quick question for you, Dave?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just Dave, you mentioned about the Bitcoin ETF, and this is for Joe and Zach. Hey, Joe. Hey, Zach. For the Bitcoin ETF question, is it reasonable to think that now that Binance will have an independent compliance group looking over all of their trading and have to file SARs? I mean, to me, this sounds like classic market surveillance, which is what you would want. So it's like it actually reinforces the notion that there could be a Bitcoin ETF. I don't know if that's the right take or not, but to me,
I think these SARs are really more about criminal activity and money laundering and sanctions than they are about the type of surveillance that's relevant to the ETF, which is much more about market manipulation and fraud.
It does, however, give them one more little shove, in terms of saying it. But I think that the question at this point is more when. It's more not if, it's more when. It had to do with they're talking about cash settlement versus in-kind settlement and tracking where the Bitcoin come from, source of funds, that sort of stuff. And they're just trying to iron out details now. And yes, they're not in any particular hurry to do so, but I guess I think there is some truth to what you're saying in the sense of if the quote big bad boogeyman of foreign markets manipulating price is less likely to be done or under more control, it kind of takes out a little bit of that argument. But I don't think we're really at that argument stage anymore.
Let me read out what Richard wrote, the new CEO of Binance. It's an honor and with the deepest humility that I step into the role of Binance's new CEO. We operate the world's largest crypto exchange by volume. The trust placed on us by our 150 million users and thousands of employees is a responsibility that I take seriously. With CZ and our leadership team support, I've accepted this role so that we can continue to meet and exceed. By the way, who stepped down, guys, just a couple of days ago from Binance? Wasn't it the regulatory officer or compliance officer? Does anyone remember?
Yeah, it was a senior compliance officer.
Why would he step down just 2-3 days before this ruling?
Because he's being fired and replaced with an outside.
Oh yes,
compliance
of course,
monitor.
yeah. True. With CZ and our leadership team support, I've accepted the foundation on which Binance stands today is stronger than ever. I'm sure Mike would agree 100% now. To ensure a bright future, I intend to use everything that I've learned over the past 3 decades of financial services and regulatory experience to guide our remarkable, innovative, and committed team. And actually, I want to get Mike's thoughts on Richard Tang and how big of a difference he makes replacing CZ. My focus will be on 3 things. 1, reassuring users that they can remain confident in the financial strength, security, and safety of the company. 2, collaborating with regulators to uphold high standards globally that foster innovation while providing important consumer protection. I think regulators drafted this tweet. And 3, working with partners to drive growth and adoption of Web3. We are here to stay. Please send me your support. Lend me your support. Excited for the days ahead. Just a pretty basic statement. I think nothing special there. And then lastly, there's a jab by Brian Armstrong. I haven't read it, but someone pinned it at the top. I'll just read that as well. Since the founding of Coinbase back in 2012, we have taken a long-term view. I knew we needed to embrace compliance and become a generational company that stood the test of time. We got the licenses, hired the compliance and legal teams, and made it clear our brand was about trust with our customers and following the rules. We wanted to increase transparency and raise the bar on trusts, so we became a public company in 2021. This meant we couldn't always move as quickly as others. There we go. It's more difficult and expensive to take a compliant approach. We can't launch every product that customers want when it's illegal, but it's the right approach because we believe in the rule of law. Today's news reinforces that doing it the hard way was the right decision. We now have an opportunity to start a new chapter for this industry. We took a lot of arrows operating here in the US due to the lack of regulatory clarity, and my hope is that today's news serves as a catalyst to finally achieve that. Americans should not have to go offshore unregulated should not have to go to offshore unregulated exchanges to benefit from this technology. This industry should be built here in America in a compliant way under US law. We're going to stay here in the US because we believe in economic freedom, and the US democratic system will eventually get this right. Decentralization in crypto is a powerful tool to update the financial system and build a global economy with more economic freedom. We're just getting started. So my question to the panel, and we'll go to Eugene and Simon, and anyone else, is two things. Richard's statement, and not really a statement, doesn't say much, but Richard as a new CEO is number one, and number two, what does this ruling, this press conference and the allegations against or CZ pleading guilty, what does this all mean for the rest of the exchanges?
Can I jump in on Richard real quick, just because I think it's
go ahead,
important?
Mike. Yeah.
For the history of Binance, the only executive that actually mattered was CZ. So like all the other appointments essentially didn't matter. All of the people in Binance US essentially didn't matter because they had no real power. So I think I might be taking a view that sounds different than what I've said before, but I think this actual appointment might be critical, because even though you have the monitor there, you still need to have somebody driving the actual business decisions, the actual strategy going forward. And I think if CZ tries to be too involved in that, he will violate the terms of the plea agreement. And so it's possible he's actually able to do things differently going forward. He may be able to stop a lot of the things that were potentially harmful to customers. So I think it's quite important from a signaling standpoint, and it's also probably pretty important for the actual direction of the firm going forward. So I'm optimistic that maybe he can make changes now.
Well, one of the things, totally agreed. And one of the things, so on the Binance side, it's interesting that announcement talked about thousands of employees. I'd be curious as to where those employees are. Being at Binance Blockchain Week in Paris, I remember talking to some Binance folks. Of course, the higher folks knew more, but certainly people even in middle management were just kind of completely perplexed as to who is in Binance and who actually worked there and how many of them there were, right? So it's a very secretive organization. I mean, a lot of crypto companies are, but we're talking about a secretive crypto organization that is operating, the largest exchange by volume in the world with thousands of employees. We talked about this earlier, but CZ, after he left Singapore, after they decided to do less in Singapore because they couldn't get their, they didn't like what the MAS, the monetary authority there was doing more in Dubai and Paris. And Dubai specifically, of course, is where famously, the Terra Luna founder, Do Kwon, ran away to or was trying to before he of course got caught in the Balkans because they don't have an extradition. But as we've been saying on these spaces, and what I've been saying is, it doesn't matter whether you're in a place like that. The arm of the U.S. Government is long, and they can make your life pretty rough wherever you are in the world, as we've seen time and time again. I think the reactions, I've been going back and forth about the reactions of the market. In many ways, this is a positive in the sense of what Brian Armstrong says. And, I've been following Coinbase since when I was a VC. We were looking at their deal back in 2012. They and XRP were, Ripple at the time, were, two of the darlings in Silicon Valley when it came to crypto, and they still are. And I think Brian got a lot of love by Valley VCs because he was trying to do things the quote correct way. Though we didn't even quite know what quote the correct way was. But the difficult way. So I know he even got credit back then, which is why he was a he was a pretty. I mean,
but
deals.
But what you're saying is this a win for Coinbase? And if it is, how is it a win?
I think regulatory clarity would be. I mean, it's the thing we've all been wishing for, and it'd be interesting to see where Coinbase stock goes. But judging by just the broader crypto market, is crypto seeing this as a win? I mean, we're just barely off. I mean, you'd think, okay, Black Swan event, there has been an announcement and now there's been barely movement. I mean, there's been a lot of volatility, a lot of volume in trading, but there hasn't been a lot of price movement in sort of the big, let's call it the Big 10 when it comes to by market cap of coins. It's interesting. Of L1s, I'd say in particular. I think that it'll be interesting to see where we go. I'm curious. I pose a question to the rest of the group, like where do we go from here? Where does DeFi go? You posed it, Mario, and others. Is this good for DeFi or not? What happens with what happens?
And
with
the other,
Binance
and as well, the other exchanges as well, they have to play by the same rules. Like Joe and Mike, I'd love you to take that, and then I'd go to Ben to get his thoughts on all the news.
It's definitely a win for Coinbase. Coinbase's internal view, and I've talked about this with several senior people there. They don't really like Binance, but they're not going to say that publicly. They'll tell you that privately, because it's not really a fair game when you're trying to kind of follow the rules and not commingle customer funds and not list every shitcoin and every Ponzi on your platform, and this larger exchange globally can kind of do whatever they want and seemingly with impunity. So them being held accountable is sort of a justification essentially for Coinbase's more conservative strategy historically. So I think it's a huge win. I mean, the stock says that. The stock's trading not far from the 52-week highs. It's more than tripled off the bottom earlier this year, and I think it has a lot more upside because Coinbase is the exchange that's most intertwined with the institutionalization push in the U.S. related to ETFs. BlackRock, Fidelity, Invesco, all these big asset managers are coming in, and a lot of them are going to at least be doing some of their trading, at least initially, on Coinbase. And part of that is because traditional asset managers don't necessarily want to trade with Fidelity directly because Fidelity is their competitor. So I think Coinbase has a great future ahead in the US, especially as they become more Bitcoin oriented, more institutional oriented, and Binance getting kind of wiped from the field because essentially they're defanged by having this monitor there. It'll stop a lot of their traditional business practices. I think it makes Coinbase more competitive. So I think privately they tell you this is great.
Question for you, Mike, or others. Do you think that there's some kind of 4D chess going on with the lawsuits of, because, the suits came out against Binance and Coinbase at the same time? Maybe the outcomes will be very different. I mean, at the time we thought, oh, well, they're just treating Binance and Coinbase the same. And now it's looking maybe like there's some chess moves involved.
Nobody thought that. I actually said in one of these spaces with Mario that there's a huge bright line between Binance and Coinbase because nobody's accusing Coinbase of facilitating terrorist financing to Hamas, to the Iranian National Guard, to whoever, right? They're not accusing them of violating sanctions. They're not accusing them of an unbacked stablecoin or commingling customer funds in a really reckless manner. So yeah, like their SEC is going to go after everyone because that's Gensler's MO. It's a regulation through enforcement, but it doesn't actually say anything about the relative differences in the business models or the relative levels of safety structurally between Coinbase and Binance. You have to do the work individually to understand that.
Something really quick just to throw in, super brief here, but the really big value of Coinbase playing by the rules and being a good actor and a good operator in the space is not just that, we have this, very successful US-based exchange to point to, but it's also enabled Coinbase and their partners to be able to get involved politically without having any sort of serious backlash. I mean, if you look at Binance trying to get involved politically, they've been sort of cut out from the broader crypto lobbying space. Most firms wouldn't even take their money because it was so toxic. Ultimately now looking like even some of the later firms that were working with them are moving away from that for obvious reasons. But the benefit of the opposite side of the coin of that is with Coinbase being so clean cut and having a good operation, they are, thankfully diving deep into advocating for Bitcoin and crypto broadly. Originally starting up their Stand with Crypto operation, they set out with saying, hey, let's find one advocate for this technology in every congressional district in the United States. And ultimately, the project was so successful that they found that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of advocates signing up on a regular basis, and they spun that off into what is now Stand with Crypto, and is a really successful operation that's taking place to be able to help people better advocate. And why that's all important is because at the end of the day, yes, there are the powers that be in Washington, D.C., but, this is still the United States, and voters and their impact on elected officials still exists. We still live in a democracy. And so now that they've dove so head over heels into the advocacy space, we're starting to see some real movement amongst the political folks in the space. They're starting to pay attention, and they're going to pay more attention, especially as groups like Coinbase, Stand with Crypto, even my organization, Satoshi Action. As we have more and more success, you're going to see things start to move in a better direction.
What's interesting is the FTT token just spiked up from the hell since 11th of August, over the last a while ago, but spiked up 8% today. But I didn't know it went up so much over the last couple of months. I do want to go to. Yeah, I don't know, man. I do want to go just get a bit of a market update as well. Ben, would love to get your thoughts before we go to Jason, Joe, and Simon. Get your thoughts on the news today, on the announcement, on the indictment, and just the market's response so far.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good stuff so far since I've been on for about the last 10 minutes. I agree with a lot of what Mike said. I know Mike, and obviously I love Dennis. I agree with everything Dennis said. But I think Mike, one thing about this situation here is, Mike and also Corey Klippstein and a lot of these other guys, they said that this was going to be the death of Binance a year and a half ago, and that it was insolvent and people were going to lose money. And I'm not picking on Mike right now. I mean, he knows that he said those things. And I think today is evidence that that's not necessarily true. It's not insolvent. If it was, then I don't think they'd be making a settlement and allowing them to move on. And I think that this is actually extremely bullish news for the entire market all the way around, because we got the scenario, and who knows, this could be the scenario we see with Tether as well. If Tether and obviously Bittrex and Omni and all of them that were Brock Pierce in the beginning of Tether, if these guys are held accountable eventually one day, maybe it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. Because you got to understand, for the government right now, if they were to pull the plug, like let's say Tether or Binance were insolvent or something like that, or Tether didn't have all their backing and things like that, what would happen if they pulled the plug on this? I mean, it could bring down the entire crypto market if those two things went together. And I don't think anybody wants to do that. Now, there's so much money on the line with BlackRock and these ETFs and Ethereum. And you guys know a Solana ETF and an XRP ETF will be coming, down the road eventually. Like, this stuff will all happen. And so I think that, we got the best case scenario here, which is all the people that hate CZ, which I like CZ. I think he's a better actor. I think he's a better actor than Brian Armstrong, regardless of what, just happened. But the fact is that I believe that this is good for the space, because all the people that hate him, okay, look, kind of like when I got removed from my company for temporarily. All the people that hate me, they were really happy, and people are really happy today. A lot of these people that said CZ was bad. And the other side of it is, for all the people that thought that it was going to be insolvent and it was going to come down, like, those people are wrong now.
How are they wrong when they're asking in the court papers they need 15 months to gather up 1.5 billion for a company on paper that has revenue?
Well, we'll see. We'll
see.
No,
not we'll see. That's what it says in the documents. They need 15.
Right.
They filed documents with the court. They said they need 15 months after settlement, which, by the way, that is going to likely be in the spring. Right, that's when
is that unusual? But is that unusual, Joe? Like giving
yes,
them
absolutely. They filed in the
the
pleadings that they need time to make together the cash, and they need 5, and that's just part of the 4 billion. 1.5 they need over a year to gather the cash.
Maybe they don't need, but maybe they don't need. Maybe they don't need. I'll give you the mic. But what if they don't need that time? They're just doing it for the time value of money. They're just like, why not get an extra year and a half?
Yeah, they're saying they need the time to gather the cash. That's their own lawyers. So I don't know what you're talking about. You're just making things up because you like CZ. I get it, but that's not the facts.
Well, are they saying they literally?
Maybe you should read it before you're sitting in a space with thousands of people talking about it.
Yeah, I'm asking you a question. I'm asking you, could you read exactly what it said? Because I would like to know the exacts of the wording of that, because that lets me know how to.
Do you know how to read? I mean, I posted.
Well, no, I'm driving. I'm driving actually, so I can't read it. Like if I did read it, that I think be against the law. But my point is, like when you look at 15 months down the road, what is going to be going on in 15 months? A raging bull run? Or are they just trying, the time value of money? I don't know. And you sound like a lawyer, I guess, or something like that. And you seem to know that maybe the way they filed it indicates that's not true. I'm not a legal expert. Or someone that can read those documents.
No, but you're yelling at people, telling them that they were, proven wrong by the fact that Binance is proven to be not, having problems with solvency.
But would they? But Joe, would they have accepted the settlement though if they didn't have the money, Joe? That was a question I asked earlier as well.
Part of the settlement that they get their compliance folks in there, which has not happened, and they put forward a proposal in the government's plea memorandum for the appointment of this person, meaning that they haven't even chosen who the person is. There's a criteria with which they select the independent monitor. right? So we, number one, have to figure out who is the independent monitor. Number two, that person has to get in there. Number three, they have to actually put eyes on the books and check what's there. While you've got compliance officers and the founder running with his tail between his legs, pleading guilty to federal crimes. So let's not do the victory lap right here before we know any of that information.
Well, I would think I understand that. I'm looking forward at how I project this playing out. Certainly, it has not played out completely, and certainly I don't know the logistics around the SEC case against them. I would think probably piling on top, maybe for a financial settlement would be pretty easy, but wouldn't be nearly that much money. $3.4 billion, I think, is the actual number. But the fact is that either way here. I believe that this is going to be good. I don't think they would be agreeing to this and CZ pleading guilty if he thought he was about to go to prison forever and Binance was insolvent, was about to go down. I don't think that's the way this would be going, that they would be cooperating with the DOJ
And
at this level. It sounds like they are.
And the other one will be like, and maybe I go to you, Mike, as you refer to as well. What would Richard Tang take that position? Richard Tang take that position if he thought Binance would be insolvent, not able to pay the $4 point whatever billion dollars?
I don't think that anybody passes up a role that big that elevates you. I mean, it's like Emmett Shear coming from Twitch taking the OpenAI role. Like, why would you say no to that?
It wouldn't elevate you.
I pass on the OpenAI role.
Exactly. Yeah, that's with OpenAI, but wouldn't elevate you if Binance is about to go bust.
Yeah, but so can I just address Ben real quick, because I like
Please,
Ben
go ahead.
as well.
Sure, yeah.
Ben's very entertaining, but like nuance often gets lost, and I'm going to forgive Ben for not being here for the last few hours when we went into great detail on this. But the reality is, like, especially not me, like I never called for Binance to collapse. I never said with certainty it was insolvent. I pointed out a fact pattern of literally 100+ things that are not consistent with a well-run entity. So I just want to put it on the record once and final, because I think Ben and others missed the nuance of this point. You can call out things that companies do that don't make sense or illegal or probably they shouldn't do without saying for sure you said they were going to go down. All of that said, I actually agree with Ben. We are in a bull market. So the nuance here is, yes, Binance has been defanged. Yes, there's going to be a new CEO. CZ is gone. There's going to be a monitor. They're not going to be able to wash trade, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And also, Bitcoin is already in a structural bull market that's likely to continue for the next 12 to 18 months at a minimum. And that does not care at all about what any of us in this space think about Binance or how much Ben wants to mischaracterize my previous statements. And that's all I'm going to say for today. And I'm going to go.
Okay, Mike, I would like to say, like, I didn't mean to mischaracterize your statements. There was a time when FTX went down, when everybody, not everybody, of course, a lot of people were on Twitter, dragging on Binance, and certainly I don't remember exactly the words that you said. I do know Corey Clipson was saying that stuff, but you definitely were part of look, the word.
I was extremely Ben. I was extremely negative on Binance because I said there were dozens of things that are risk fact, red flags. I never said any of the things you just said. And when you come out swinging like that, driving around in your Lamborghini, it just comes across more like entertainment
Mike,
than
I
real
don't have a
discussion.
Lamborghini anymore. That's what everybody knows.
Did they take that? Sorry, my bad.
They did. Yeah, they did take that. That hurt. Okay, it
Mike,
hurt a lot.
what was that, Mike? That was just it's escalated it very quickly. Jesus,
I actually like Ben. I really do. I really like Ben.
Yeah,
So we're cool, Ben. We're cool. I'm not angry.
Yeah, I just want to make. I got to run, but I just want to make one more point here, because I really want to follow up on what I was saying about this being bullish for the space. Because certainly, if this plays out terribly and Binance goes down and it's insolvent and everybody loses money and CZ goes to prison for life or whatever, like, yeah, it's not good. But I don't think that stuff is going to happen. And I think what this is going to do is this is going to calm down a lot of the Binance FUD. And look, FUD can be true or it cannot be true. It doesn't, FUD is just the idea that there's negative things being put out about something. And for a long time, people have accused Binance of all kinds of stuff. And congratulations, just like every single exchange that exists that's been around since before 2018, probably, they've all done wrong things because there was lack of clarity and there were gray areas and nobody knew exactly what they were doing. And people exercised that gray area to move to the fringes of the gray area to right before they knew what they were doing was completely illegal and wrong, and tried to live in that. And we've seen that all across the space. And I can't say for sure about Coinbase, but I don't think Coinbase is blameless here either. And so what I'm saying here is that this is really bullish because one of these main narratives that's against crypto, I believe, is probably going to be removed or at least tamped down, quite a bit. And I think with Binance Coin and with Binance itself, I think this is both a blessing and a curse in a way, because it is a blessing if it allows Binance to move on and move forward without the FUD and without people saying it's getting shut down and all this stuff. They've got the monitor. Sure, their numbers go down. I also agree heavily with what I believe Mike said earlier when he was talking about Coinbase. This is a great day for Coinbase. Coinbase is going to eat up a lot of that market share, and that's what the United States wants. They want Coinbase to be able to move up and be a more significant player across the world. I really believe that, and this is going to take away a little from Binance. However, when it comes to curse, like, look, Binance just lost the richest guy in crypto. They lost what is probably, since Sam left, the face of crypto, which is CZ. And so it obviously is going to be a big blow to them, but they'll be able to move forward. And Richard Tang has been installed for, I mean, he's been, basically the CEO for quite a while now. So I think this is, can be looked at as a good or a bad thing, but I think overall this is going to be good for the space. And as we see with all of the exchanges that get in trouble every single time, hopefully we clean some stuff up and we get some good regulation out of it to prevent these things from happening. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'll see you all later. Bye.
Cool. I think this
I
is
have a hard,
yeah. Go ahead,
hard
Dennis,
time.
Jason.
Just a hard time. I appreciate your comments, Ben. Just have a hard time comparing, what's going on at Binance and with CZ with Coinbase. I mean, I've been in the space for quite some time, maybe not as long as others, but for Coinbase to be where they were at the point at which they launched and to have gotten where they are is a pretty significant feat. And it's not just like them not committing crimes; it's actually them giving a shit about protecting people's assets. They did that by building an incredible world-class security background to make sure that customers' funds were always safe. And we've just never heard of customers' funds being an issue at Coinbase.
Dennis, but what happened? Moving away from Coinbase, what happened to all the other smaller exchanges that were also not playing by the rules, but just too small for the DOJ or the SEC to pay attention to? Do they now have? Are they under a lot more pressure to comply? And what would that mean for the industry?
Yeah, I just think there's going to long term going to be a lot more pressure to comply, and certainly there are parts of the U.S. financial system which are too difficult to comply to, and you'll see a fall off of probably a lot of the smaller exchanges from participating in the market. So I'm personally long term very bullish on Coinbase for the fact that they have been playing the game the right way for so long that they are going to be in a position to likely be the only major dominant U.S. based exchange. Now there is, of course, other exchanges that are popular, that are good, that'll be around there, but they'll, in my opinion, be the dominant one for a very long time to come.
What kind of follow-up question to that, and Dennis or others? I mean, think about all the other U.S. I do agree that this is kind of a strong signal from the government. Hey, if you're not playing by the rules, get in line. But there's all these great American companies whose names aren't Coinbase that are doing some great crypto innovation that have been just hampered by this. I mean, just examples: DYDX, a Brooklyn-based crypto derivatives exchange that services the world except for Americans. I mean, it's a highly used product, and it's incredible. It's being based out of Brooklyn, but not being used. I mean, Compound, one of the big, DeFi protocols based in San Francisco. We share actually corporate counsel with them, so we've learned a lot just from even our corporate counsel as sort of a nice additive benefit. But it's like those are just a few examples of well-known names in crypto that it's like where do they stand, right? Where is this going to go? Where does non-centralized exchanges, if you're operating something like Compound, what is the regulatory guideline there, and how do you continue to operate? Those are questions that I still have. So Dennis or others, I'd just love to hear.
Can I just say that Robert Leshner removed any connection to Compound from his Twitter? And obviously when there was rumors about them going after Uniswap, it was the same thing. I mean, I tend to agree with you that like it's really hard to operate a decentralized protocol of any type or launch a decentralized protocol in the US. But I can also see from the regulator standpoint that if you're essentially issuing the equivalent of a security and never registering, then there's a risk that a lot of consumers would lose money. So I can kind of see it both ways, but it seems like a lot of founders have just decided to like disassociate themselves from their original project, in part to kind of give the appearance that it's truly decentralized. Like I'm not really involved, like in this other foundation, or I'm just doing something totally different. So I think to your point, like it's really hard to do that in the US right now. I don't know how that shakes out, and I don't know what the right answer is. But I see the way founders are dealing with it now, and they're mostly kind of hiding from the regulators.
The problem is that U.S. securities laws, as they currently stand, are just not really compatible with crypto. right? There isn't really a way to comply with the US securities laws. There's not the infrastructure out there. In the very limited infrastructure that there is, there's no liquidity and there's no users. And so it's very difficult to build. And definitely, like, look, I work with a lot of different crypto startups. Those are most of who my clients are, and a lot have overseas foundations. But I worry that that's also not a long-term fix, right? Like the SEC is going to think it has jurisdiction if you have any US users. And if you're a decentralized protocol, unless you're whitelisting wallets, you're going to have US users. And so you can put in your terms of service, we don't allow US persons. You can raise from VCs abroad. You can claim to use a foundation. But we've seen in some of these cases, like, Algorand has an offshore foundation that they claim is their main entity, and the SEC basically disregarded that and said, no, like, you guys are running a startup, right? You can call it a foundation, you can create a model in the Panama or Cayman or whatever, but if you're creating something that meets the US definition of an investment contract, and there are US persons who have access to this, either because you're directly offering it to them or because they're getting access through a VPN, we're going to come after you. And that's the bigger issue that either needs to be resolved through the courts in these big cases against the exchanges or against issuers, or we're going to need different legislation passed. I think those are the only two ways out of this.
Yeah, I think this covers it pretty well, Simon.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this concept of fairness was a big theme of the speech, and it's something we experienced firsthand. We were funding companies like Coinbase, and because we were selling equity, we were complying with securities laws. But in 2018, a bunch of our companies, where we were going to be selling equity for them, they didn't want to sell equity because there was this new way of raising finance. It was called issue a token, and then Binance would allow you to list it on their launch pad. They'd be a market maker. They'd pump the price for you. They'd charge you millions in their own tokens in order to, have their position as well. And that completely disrupted the model. And so that went on for like about 2 years until we had the crackdown. But there is a deep unfairness and this was one of the quotes that they gave in the speech, move fast and break things. And they definitely went through that model of once, it's better to apologize for something, I think was the thing, and beg for forgiveness later. And I think the
What was
quote
the? So go ahead.
Yeah, the quote they ended with is, there's a philosophy which is, well, they didn't say Ethereum, but it's kind of the Ethereum philosophy of move fast and break things. But they said if you break the law, then eventually that will come to roost.
Yeah, that was one of the points I wrote. There was another thing that we're talking about in the press conference. I think let's kind of focus on that a bit. Not sure if anyone caught it, about the banner they had saying, I don't know if it was a joke, just sounded too ridiculous just to get attention. But essentially, they had a banner, an advertising banner saying something about laundering money. If you can't launder money, come to Binance, something along those lines. And I think they said that this ad did not go out. So I'm just not sure why they mentioned it other than grab attention. Did anyone catch that?
Yeah, I think it was just an example of the type of jokes they would make to each other as a message. I don't think it was actually an ad they wanted to put out.
Well, so they use a joke as a way to portray their
They said they
Yeah,
had
well,
a culture internally.
if you're messaging your team on Signal and you're saying jokes like that, that's just an implication of how you treat it.
Not really. Or they just have a weird sense of humor like I do. I make crazy jokes. It doesn't mean that reflects my personality, my character. So I think just him making that's just, unless someone disagrees, but I find it to be a dumb example. But maybe then again, my company's not the size of Binance, so probably I'm not as careful as Binance.
But this is one of the things, like, this is a modern age problem. What you say and what you write and what you DM to people, this has been the theme. It will be used against you. Like if you've been involved in any of these Chapter 11s, anytime someone comes in on the court and they go under deposition, literally every tweet you use, every DM you make, messages you think are private, this shit's going to be used against you. And even when you're doing nothing wrong, lawyers have a very good way of taking out of context and using that
even
to
a
destroy
joke.
you.
Even a joke, like I was reminiscent to what happened to me last year. So yeah, even a joke could be taken out of context. Absolutely true. But I just think it's weird.
To back you up, and you and Simon both actually, just a quick side note interlude. OpenAI, which we've been covering on some of the other spaces, When Emmett Shear, the CEO of Twitch, joined as CEO of OpenAI, the employees on Slack responded with an FU emoji. This was widely reported, actually, as it's happening now.
There's also another couple of points. Let me get Dave. I see your hand up, so I'm going to mention a couple of other things in the press conference. One of them is the Tai Chi strategy, which is really interesting, and I think it was mentioned in the lawsuit by the SEC, where they pretend to try to abide by to play by the rules, but that wasn't really their intention. Another thing was the UNKWN, the unknown. They were users. They were US users. So I had a code word for unknown users, which were meant to be US users, which just sounds to be a bit dumb of a strategy. And that represented, I think he said 17%, 1/7 of total users from memory. And then there's the quote that I think you mentioned, Simon, better to ask for forgiveness rather than permission, which was another, I'm just going through my points, which is another one. These are three weird points that I wrote down. And then there's other more concerning ones that employees encouraged high volume users to conceal transactions and help them obscure locations, which I found to be pretty, one of the bigger red flags. Dave?
Yeah, I was just going to point out, because you always ask about markets. We're right now in the period of time when the CME is closed and before Asia has really woken up. And while we've been talking the market, Bitcoin is down like $400, and I've been watching on our new book aggregator, and it's like an avalanche of small orders in Bitcoin Tether has been what's been driving it down. And I looked at a bunch of altcoins, and they seem to be following Bitcoin more than everything else, it's just interesting, because this is a period of time when it felt like the CME was kind of holding Bitcoin up while it was open. It closed, and it's been kind of sliding. And Asia is not awake to kind of judge the implication. And there have been some weird tweets of people saying people trying to withdraw a lot from Binance. I mean, we're not seeing any decrease in volume or liquidity, but who the hell knows? I mean, that'll be really interesting to watch over the next couple of days.
Yeah, Mary, this is an interesting theme that came up in the FTX case, which is using code to try and prove intent. And so if you suddenly have a bunch of US users and then you update the database so they're all labeled as unknown, they're clearly going to probably be using that in the case of an intent to say that they deliberately tried to circumvent. And this came up in the FTX case where they were going deep into the code, and they had the account that was, obviously they had the 7 different versions of the balance sheet where they label things differently to give it to Genesis, Gemini. Yeah, Genesis. Sorry, I always get confused with those ones. Also trying to look deep into the code to figure out why there was the one account, which was Alameda, and all of the different functions there. So, and I think they had, FTX Lend, which they needed to rename, and then it ended up as like the Chinese bribe or whatever, which we're still yet to see was the Korean account, and then the payments to Thai prostitutes and stuff. So I think we got a little indication of the types of things they're probably going to be using against Binance and the labeling to kind of prove intent.
I'm going through the comments, by the way. I just want to read one. He said, Travis won't like this one. Where's Mike? Damn, Mike won't like this one either, so I'll send it to him. There's no indemnity clause. No, this is not it. Okay, there it is. For all the speakers that have been fudding Binance customers the last 15 months on here, now would be a good time to start looking inwards. Yeah, Travis, start looking inwards. You were wrong. He was innocent, and there's nothing wrong with Binance. So start looking inwards, please, Travis.
Incredible take, but okay.
Let's go through the comments here.
And this is one of the things that comes with all these tribes, Mario, with these companies. Stockholm syndrome is a real thing, and people will see things exactly how they want to see them.
I think the way they see it is that it could have been a lot worse, but like just the fact that the regulators tried not to bring the industry down with Binance doesn't mean that Binance is innocent. But at the same time, it doesn't mean, at least from what we have so far, and I believe that's the case, there is no wash trading, for example, and other allegations that were made are at least not space true, not untrue, because Travis won't like that, or Mike won't like that, but not space true. Joe, would love your thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that, and I'll try to make this brief. I think there's sort of this probably inappropriate extremes that are sort of being put forward on this. That there is a small minority that thinks like something like this will cause Binance to collapse, or it will completely destroy its operations, and then there's another group that says this is bullish and it's not going to really matter in the long run. I think that both of those are wrong. I think it's just going to be a very different market. And the question that folks should be asking themselves right now is, what does a bull market look like, whereby one of the major exchanges by spot volume now has substantial oversight, regular 24/7 unfettered access to Treasury and FinCEN and others who are going to have that line of communication now moving forward at Binance? That's one question. And you may answer that by saying, well, they'll just pivot. It's international. They'll go to another exchange where it doesn't have that KYC, it doesn't have those controls in place. Well, if that's the case, then you should expect DOJ to follow with the suit with the same types of enforcement actions and the same investigation to any other suits where they pivot to away from Binance. And there's a reason why these participants don't trade on Coinbase, right? What percentage of the global spot volume is money laundering? That's a real key question that people have to think of. And what impact is that going to have in a bull run? You may say it's negligible and it doesn't matter at all. Maybe that's correct. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. That's more of just a fact question. But we're going to find out, and that's what's ahead of us, I think, for the upcoming bull run.
Joe, what percentage do you think is?
That's a great use.
I was just going to say, what percentage do you think is?
I have no idea. I mean, I think it's very hard to tell. I mean, I don't have access to what Binance has, but I do know, as they said in the press conference, that Binance specifically catered to the U.S. market. They wanted to approach the U.S. market because they said it was 20% of the trading volumes, that they would never have grown and had the revenue from the U.S. and not gotten as big if they didn't cater to the U.S. market, both before and after they founded Binance U.S.
Yeah, I mean, what's clear is on an aggregate level, clearly there's more money laundering with fiat, specifically like with US dollars versus something like Bitcoin. But of course, Bitcoin only has a $715 billion market cap, which of course is tiny compared to others. So the question around the percentages actually is the interesting one.
Yeah, and it's also a bigger issue for altcoins, right? Like, I think it's a bigger impact to altcoins because, I don't know, this isn't my hard and fast view on this, but I know other people that are firmly convinced that many of the altcoin activity is, just pump and dumps. There's people intervening and propping up coins and trading against people with inside knowledge, that they're very liquid and easy to move around. So that a bull run might look very different with these controls in place.
I want to go to Jacqueline, get her quick final thoughts on this, Jacqueline.
Yeah, I think when it comes to situations like this, even if it's not billions of dollars, it's millions or hundreds of millions of dollars that they're talking about in criminal activity. So when you look at the grand scheme, it might not be significant to, crypto market players, but that is significant to the average person who has to either be a victim of this when it comes to terrorist organizations or just crime in general. And that's something that they highlighted a lot during the press conference.
Yeah, I'm going through the comments. People are considering this like a big win for crypto, that Binance did the right thing. Again, just want to repeat what I consider. I think Binance made mistakes. I think they made them a while ago. I think they're trying to clean shop since. And I think this is important to mention, because if that wasn't the case, if they haven't done the right thing since the early days, I don't think there'd be the regulators, the DOJ would be as lenient as it was in this case. I think there wouldn't have been a chance for Binance to survive. And at the same time, like another big learning lesson for me, or not a kind of big conclusion for me, is that the DOJ, the whatever you want to call them, the government, the regulators, they don't want to kill crypto. SEC could be an exception, but otherwise they don't really want to kill crypto. Otherwise they could have played this very differently. So I think this is probably the most positive thing I got out of this, other than the survival of Binance. And then we'll see in 6 months' time whether CZ will end up to be in jail or not. So that's more of a, if you're really waiting for that and consider that important, it'll be more on a personal level, because I don't think it'll have any bearing on the markets. But yeah, I like CZ, so I hope he doesn't go to jail, obviously. But that's how I look at it. I think net very positive for the markets. That's why I was a bit surprised that the markets didn't do as well as I expected. But then again, the markets have done well for the last few weeks and months. So it's kind of my 2 cents. Zach, any final quick words?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's a little bit hard to imagine that CZ is not going to do any prison time, right? Given that this
even house arrest instead of prison.
I think prison, right? I think this is a coup for him to negotiate these lighter charges. I think 18 months is not big for someone who presided over what I agree that crypto is mostly not money laundering, but in terms of nominal amounts, this is a huge amount of money laundered that we're talking about. And if you're a judge who's doing this sentencing and there's been this pre-negotiated plea to these lesser charges and the government is asking for the upper end of that range, I don't know what you could possibly see in, as good as CZ's lawyers are, I don't know what you could see in his sentencing submissions that would lead you to say, okay, no prison time. Like, I think that's very
How long? How long? So he does go to prison. How long would
I
you
think
guess?
he's going to get the full 18 months. Now, I think that's much better than it could have been if the government brought more serious charges, right? I think that is still a win for CZ, and I think these charges are a win for crypto, putting the SEC stuff aside. But I think he's going to do the 18 months.
I'm just thinking whether it's all worth it. Like, he built an incredible company, made a lot of money.
It's a good trade if you're CZ.
Is
Yeah,
it?
you have to be
I don't know, man. You think would you do it to have something, to own something, to own that much equity in Binance, to have that much clout in an industry and have that much money? Would you do it for 18 months in jail?
I mean, I don't want to say I would do crimes, right? And money laundering is terrible, and I don't want to minimize that. But if you're looking just at
not without doing any crimes, just go to jail for 18 months.
Like that, I think a lot of people would make that trade.
Was that? Did he have to make that trade? I mean, I guess. This is kind of a hypothetical question.
Would you? No, forget that, Eugene. Would you make that trade? I'm actually curious.
Well, I mean, here's one of the points.
Not if I'm innocent. I don't intend to commit crimes, so I think it's a different.
No, without committing crime, you just they make a deal for you. You go to jail, you sit in a cell for 18 months
innocent.
without committing a crime.
Here's a hypothesis. So yeah, let's say you're completely innocent, right, and you still make this trade. I guess it really depends on what the alternative is, right? So it's then just
staying where you are today, which is depressing. I'm joking, but staying where you are today.
I happen to be in America, but I guess he could have just sat in Dubai. I mean, his alternative could have been to sit in Dubai for forever, I guess, technically, right?
You're avoiding the question.
We're talking about actions that happened a long time ago, right? There was this line from the press conference about it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Who can doubt that that's true? Here's one thing we know for sure. If CZ had gone to the U.S. authorities and sought regulatory approval for everything he wanted to build at Binance, from the securities side to the KYC,
Binance
wouldn't
be here.
Yeah, it wouldn't be off the ground, right? He would have none of this. And so I think, look, the problem with what we've seen so far in crypto is that it seems to be 100% true that it is better to ask for forgiveness than permission, whatever the government wants to say about it.
This is crazy to imagine, though, Zach. Like, where we are today to where we were 3 years ago. You get the two biggest names in crypto. If CZ does go to jail, and obviously will be for a very short period of time, and incomparable to Sam, but you have SBF and CZ in jail at the same time for, let's say, a few months. It's just easy to imagine now, but crazy to imagine 3 years ago.
Make for a good buddy comedy.
And where is Dennis? Yeah, Dennis, you avoided. I wanted to wrap the space, but I had a question for you. You tried to avoid the question about DCG. You said I don't want to comment on DCG, and then you commented on Tether. Why don't you want to comment on DCG? Can you comment on DCG on why you don't want to comment about it? Pretend your mic doesn't work. It's a famous trick. It doesn't. I've been doing spaces for a while. It doesn't work, Dennis. No, on that point, I think his mic is really not working because it doesn't show muted or unmuted. But on that point, I think we've covered it pretty well. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. You'll have Ryan and Scott kind of giving their lame-ass thoughts on this, and we'll see what other news comes up. We'll see how the markets reacts tomorrow as Asia wakes up. But I think we've covered it pretty well. I appreciate everyone being here. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, and I'm going to go through the comments, see what everyone thinks. Do you guys, like, for the audience, do you think this is a win for Binance and CZ, or a loss for them? And obviously, is it a win for crypto? Which the answer should be a yes. But that's about it. Thanks a lot, everyone. Really appreciate it, and appreciate you all joining last minute. And thanks, Eugene and Simon, for helping me moderate. Bye, guys.